This is the regular meeting for the BCC, March 14th. If you would, silence your phones and refrain from talking to each other. If you need to talk, go out in the hall. Would you please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? And Mr. Mike Thornton from Seagrove Baptist Church will do our invocation. Mr. Thornton, come up.
It's a privilege to be able to pray for you today. Let's pray. Father, it is a great opportunity to come and pray for our leaders of our county, Lord. I pray that you would, Father, give them the strength to lead us well. Father, give them discernment and wisdom, Father, over the decisions they make, Lord. And I pray for their influence, not only as commissioners, but as leaders in our community as well. And Father, I pray for their families and ask that your hand be upon them. Father, that you would bless them beyond measure for their service to the community and for their service to you, Lord. Father, we ask all these things in your precious and holy name. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Guest. Now call the meeting to order. Mr. Jones, are there any additions or deletions to the agenda?
Madam Chair, we have one deletion. It's under citizen request, item number 34 in your agenda. Mr. Daniel Walter has requested that item be removed from today's agenda, potentially to be added to the March 28th agenda.
Okay.
And Commissioners, there's a Neighbors Giblings bill on the EAL. I need to remove it. I'm not sure. There's a charge on there I'm not sure I approve, so I just want to make sure we get the right one. And so if we could remove that item from the EAL.
Okay. Do we have a motion to approve the agenda with the additions and deletions?
So moved.
Have a motion, have a second? Second. Motion second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Now's the time for public comments. Anything that's on the agenda, if you would come forth and state your name, spell your last name, and tell me what number you'll be speaking to. We will have a time that we speak to every item on the agenda, so if you are not going to leave early, then please wait and speak at that time. So is there anyone that needs to leave early or for any kind of other issue would need to come right now? If there is, come forth. Seeing none. Approval of the consent agenda. Are there any items to remove from the consent agenda? Okay. See, have a motion?
Second.
Motion second. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed, like sign. Okay, Mr. Davis. I mean, Mr. Jones. Okay, we need to approve the EALs, excluding the waste management. Have a motion to approve the EALs?
So moved.
Okay.
Of waste management? Of.
Okay. No, we're excluding the waste management now. Motion? Second. Motion second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay.
I'll make a motion to approve the waste management EAL.
Motion?
Second.
Motion second. Okay, go ahead.
I want to acknowledge my conflict of interest, and I have filed the proper form with the clerk, and I will not vote on this matter.
Okay. Have a motion second. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed, like sign. Okay, now Mr. Jones.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Commissioners. First item on the agenda, at the December 13, 2016 regular board meeting, you created the Customary Use Committee to review the Customary Use Ordinance and to provide a report back with if there were any recommendations for amendments to that ordinance. Honorable Judge Tom McGee is here today. Judge McGee was the chair of that committee, and he will provide you a report today with recommendations. Judge?
And thank you so much for serving on this committee. I know it was a lot of hard work, but we really do appreciate it.
Yeah, appreciate that, Madam Chairman. Madam Chairman, Commissioners, my name is Tom McGee for the record. and I did have the privilege of chairing this committee. First, I want to thank all the staff that helped us out there, and Marty and Rick and Sydney, of course, and Larry. You know, we couldn't have done it without them. I want to secondly thank the public who came to their meetings and gave us their input and their feedback on what we were doing at every meeting. and of course, I want to thank members of the committee, some of whom are here today, who very patiently listened to one another. And we had quite a few different views on the committee, and we spent 4 long sessions and came to some conclusions and recommendations for you that Sydney will present to you in full. And we appreciate the opportunity to have this input on this important piece of legislation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioners, just briefly to give you an idea of the changes that the Customary Use Ordinance Committee proposed. You should have a copy of the proposal in your agenda packet. Essentially, under paragraph 5 and 6 of the ordinance, they're, I guess, narrowing some of the uses that are allowed on private property by members of the public. And then in paragraph 6, they're including a few more items that would be prohibited by members of the public on private property. There's a few other relatively minor changes that are suggested by the committee to make it, I guess, cleaner and easier for the public to read. And then on the final page, page 4, you'll see that the committee had 3 additional recommendations about what the board could do to, I guess, make the beach better for members of the public and private property owners. And that includes promulgating rules, having the TDC publish the rules of the Customary Use Committee and the Beach Activities Ordinance, encouraging you guys to purchase private property, which or purchase property for public beach access, which you guys are already doing, and also increasing signage, making sure that the rules are published for everyone. So what I'd ask you guys to do tonight is to set a public hearing on March 28th at our next board meeting. At that time, you can decide if you want to make some changes, all of the changes, no changes, but I would ask you to go ahead and set that public hearing for March 28th, and that way, if you do want to make any changes, we can do that before the April 1st effective date of the ordinance.
Now, Sid, if we have this public hearing, it'll be only to address or take comments concerning these changes, not the entire ordinance
Yes,
as a
sir.
whole?
Yes.
Just specific to them?
Yes. And you guys can, pick and choose which of these suggestions you would like to enact.
You're going to come by and visit with everyone.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes.
I will make a motion that we set a public hearing to discuss these customary use committee's recommendations on March 28th.
And just to clarify, to set a public hearing.
Public hearing after 9 a.m.
I'll second.
You have a motion, second. Any comments from the audience on the customary use? Yes, sir, come on up.
My name is Bob Brook. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I was just wondering, Mrs. Chairwoman, does this motion only address the document that's been presented?
Just to
May
set-
no other changes be discussed at this?
We are just setting a special meeting, and then we'll have discussion from ourselves and the audience on the changes. We're just setting a public meeting tonight.
Understand that, but are the changes that are going to be discussed at this public meeting limited solely to the changes that are recommended by the Customary Use Committee, or are other changes, can other changes be considered?
I hope you went through the committee on, did you visit those, did you go to those meetings?
I went to all but one meeting.
Great. So were you able to?
I gave them the same thing that I sent to you.
Okay, so those probably will be in our report, I hope. So-
The idea was to have a public hearing on the recommendations of the committee. That does not mean you could not hear or consider other changes.
Okay.
Okay,
Sounds-
so there is the possibility to add other changes if
Absolutely.
if someone cares
You
to.
can express.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brook. Okay, anybody else? Yes, Mr. Fletcher. I will go ahead. Mr. Fletcher and then Mr. Riley. Oh, Hackmeyer. Oh, hey.
Thank you, Chairperson. Fletcher, Bill Fletcher, Fletcher. I was able to attend a couple of those meetings, and I was impressed with the input from the pretty good cross-section of folks in this county. One of the things that occurred to me, and I think it occurred to some of them, is don't implement this, whatever the changes are, April 1st, April Fool's Day. It may sound a little bad, but the consensus was you're going to have some grief either way you go. But think about extending this. And another reason, an excellent reason for that, is I think I see more coming together from these different factions in the county. So I would encourage you to consider postponing implementation to somewhere down the road, maybe another month or so. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Heckmeyer now.
Hi, I'm Bill Hackmeyer, Vizcaya. Y'all probably know me, most of you. I'm against this proposal because I think it's a valiant attempt to put lipstick on a pig. The ordinance is in my opinion, the ordinance is ugly, so I really would ask y'all to kill it. You will cost the county millions of dollars in legal fees. There are already 3 lawsuits against you, and you know, against the county, and we have an attorney with another group that's preparing another one to file against you as we speak. Besides, and my big concern for the county is beside the millions of dollars in legal fees that it's going to cost you to defend these lawsuits. And if you lose in federal court, you know you have to pay our law fees, our fees too. Of course, if we lose, we have to pay yours, but we ain't going to lose. So to pay, I mean, for the county to waste all of this money on this lawsuit for your unbased law, unbased ordinance, not only will you spend millions in legal fees, it will also result in millions of dollars of reduction in property taxes from beachfront properties. And believe me, that runs into the hundreds of millions of dollars that the beachfront property values will go down, because I've talked to several very astute real estate agents, a bunch of them, and every one of them have said there's a 30 to 40% depreciation in beachfront properties should you declare our beach public beach, no matter whether it's this this minor lipstick you're putting on the pig or not. It will cost millions of dollars in reduction in your income. So I hope you vote against it, but make no mistake.
Let them go bankrupt.
Pardon?
Let Walton County go bankrupt.
Well, but what I was going.
I can't see who is doing that.
What I was going to.
Excuse me, you cannot speak out unless you come to the podium. I have not recognized you. If you want to come next, you're more than welcome to come next. And sorry, put his time back on that I just.
Well, thank you, Cecilia. But what let's see, lost my train of thought.
And I'm sorry for that interruption.
Well, that's all right. I know that several of you will be running in 2018. And really, I'm forewarning you or whatever. Don't mean to warn you, because hell, y'all are a lot above me. But the people will know if you pass this ordinance and it costs the county taxpayers millions of dollars. Everybody in the county will know it, and I'll make damn sure I go door to door telling them. Anyway, that's my 2 cents worth. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Heckmeyer. Now, ma'am, would you like to come to the podium and speak on the customary use issue? You that did the outburst?
I do have
All right, come on up, say your name, spell your last name, and...
My name is Coy Bowman.
And you have 3 minutes.
Bowman, and I have an overwhelming question that encompasses every issue, which is, could you please explain the phrase, Walton County is a political entity?
We're talking about the customary use ordinance of the
Right,
the
which
actual
gives Walton, the
scheduling
Walton
of-
County permission to make decisions down
Okay,
here
I tell you
on this
what you
land.
need to do. You need to sit down right now and come to the end, at the end of the meeting, you may come back up.
At the end?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay,
Thank
sounds
you
great.
very much. Anybody else on the customary use? Yes, sir, come on up.
Hi, my name's David Bailey, B-A-I-L-E-Y.
Thank you for serving on the committee too, Mr. Bailey.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I know it's not always appropriate to ask questions of folks on your side of the dais, but it will make my statement a little shorter. Sydney, were you able to provide this statement?
We have
the
that.
commission? You did? Okay.
All we did tonight is set a meeting, David.
Understood.
You can come to the next meeting and express that, and we do have copies of that already.
Great, good, okay. I guess my one last question then is, do you anticipate having any discussion of the content tonight, or just setting the public hearing and the discussion will occur next time?
Just set the public hearing, and we're going to have discussion in Funiac in 2 weeks.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you, David. All right, anyone else? Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed, like sign. Okay, we're going on to the planning director selection.
Commissioners, the planning director position was advertised from December 20th, 2016 to February 3rd, 2017. After the advertisement closed, each of you were presented with each of the applicants that we received for your review. At the February 14, 2017 meeting, each of you indicated those candidates which you wish to have interviewed. It was determined by the board that 5 individuals would be extended invitations to be interviewed. 4 of those candidates accepted, 1 did not. Between February 21st and March 1st, each of those 4 candidates were interviewed individually by each one of you. And as I said, the 5th candidate withdrew before his interview time. So tonight is the night to get your thoughts on those candidates. You have in your board book a ranking sheet that has each of those 4 candidates listed with a 1 through 4 ranking. So we would ask you at this time to fill those forms out. Your number 1 candidate will receive 4 points. Your number 2 candidate will receive 3 points. Your number 3 candidate 2 points, and the number 4 candidate 1 point. The clerk has a tally sheet that once they're filled out and signed, if you will pass them to her, when she gets a moment, she will tally those and report back to us. Any questions on the process?
And Commissioners, under the Sunshine Law rule, we have to announce each of your tallies today, each of your individual tallies. We have to announce it after the tally, just so you know.
I have a question on this issue. May I?
There's no motion or second.
There's no motion to second right now. Okay, you want us to move on while we're waiting?
We can, she's going to need to take minutes. You want to take a moment to do that, or do you want to?
We can move on. We'll move on, and you just let us know.
Yeah, she's got to.
Oh, never mind.
Yeah, let's just give her.
We'll give you a minute, yes.
I know she's good, but, you know.
Us women can multitask. And men too, I suppose.
Not nearly as good as you ladies.
Can I ask who dropped out? You said only 4 or 5. Who was one of the guys that dropped out?
Cecilia, can you tell Ms. Bowman who?
Gates or Gats or something like that.
Mr. Gatz.
Mr. Gatz, okay. Can I ask a question about one of the 4 choices?
No, there's no
No.
motion.
No, I'm not allowed to ask a question about your 4 choices.
Well, when we have a motion on the floor, you can ask a question.
Okay.
Another thing I want to look at guys, that when I heard Mr. Brown, I think he really was. I've only had it to 92 busted. The cops had by the way, there's costs. Yeah.
Commissioners, your rankings have been, pardon me, have been totaled. Stephen Bourne has 16 points. Matt Carpenter had 13 points. Christian Shell had 16 points. Heather Whitmore had 7 points. So there's a tie for the top candidate between Steve Bourne and Kristen Shell. If you would like to rank those two to see if one comes out on top, we could do that with just those two in the mix. We don't have, would that work?
Yes, but we are going to have to announce the individual commissioners'
okay.
rankings before we do that.
All right.
Sorry.
Just some blank sheets.
Wow. What about after you would interview both and then decide
If that's what you'd like to do, that would certainly work.
You want us to interview them again?
well, I think, maybe I don't mean interview, but go through the process, maybe one of them.
I'm ready to make a decision. I've interviewed
Okay.
both of them.
All right.
I mean,
Okay.
unless somebody
No,
wants
that's
to
fine, that's
re-interview.
fine. I didn't know what the choices were going to be.
So if you will just put number 1 choice
Oh,
and number 2 choice, and we will rank those. While you're doing that, I will read out the ratings from the last selections. Commissioner Anderson selected Steve Bourne, number 1, and Matt Carpenter, Christian Shell, Heather Whitmore, number 4. Commissioner Commander, Matt Carpenter 1, Heather Whitmore 2, Kristen Shell 3, Steve Bourne 4.
Who is that? Who was that last one?
Commissioner Commander.
Okay.
Commissioner Nipper, Kristen Shell 1, Matt Carpenter 2, Steve Bourne 3, Heather Whitmore 4. Commissioner Jones, Stephen Bourne 1, Kristen Shell 2, Matt Carpenter 3, Heather Whitmore 4. Commissioner Chapman, Steve Bourne 1, Matt Carpenter 2, Kristen Shell 3, Heather Whitmore 4.
Some people are slower than others.
But having to write out the names, that takes a little longer.
Larry can't count.
On the second ballot, Mr. Bourne had 3 first choice and 2 second choice. Ms. Shell had 2 first choice and 3 second choice. So while very close, Mr. Bourne is currently the top candidate.
We need to read this.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Sorry to remind.
Commissioner Anderson, Steve Bourne, first choice, Christian Shell, second choice. Commissioner Jones, Stephen Bourne, first choice, Christian Shell, second choice. Commissioner Chapman, Steve Bourne, first, Christian Shell, second. Commissioner Nipper, Christian Shell, first, Steve Bourne, second. Commissioner Commander, Ms. Shell, first, and Mr. Bourne, second.
So do we have a motion that we...
I'll make a motion that we accept the vote we just made and go into negotiations with Mr. Bourne for the planner's position.
Second.
A motion second. Now, do we have any comments from the audience on... Yes, ma'am. Come up, state your name, spell your last name.
Hi, my name's Coy Bowman, B-O-W-M-A-N. So I understand that there was a list of about 20 people that applied for this job, and these 5 that you just mentioned, or 4 because one dropped out, were the people that you all together as a BCC committee decided were the top 5 choices of those more than a dozen people who applied for the job, right?
Yes.
So y'all picked the top 5.
That we wanted to interview.
That you wanted to interview. So one of those men is Matt Carpenter, the current, who's been the current head of planning so some time now, maybe since 2002.
Yeah, make sure...
That's not correct.
No, he's not been head of planning, no.
Head of building.
No, not head of building.
He's an employee in the planning department, ma'am, as a planning manager.
Okay, but he's been a part of the planning department office for some time now, been a part of the team. Okay, so when I spoke to Mac on the phone, he referred to the creek behind my house as a trench. So
okay.
Now I'm confused as to how a man could confuse a creek and a trench and then to
Ma'am, we've already voted, and if you want to talk about the process or if you want to talk about the planning director selection, that's fine, but anything
Right, okay.
personal you'll need to.
No, the process by which you've chosen this person of such authority in this county is corrupt in my eyes, that you chose the first 5, and then you also get to vote on which of those 5 it is. And one of those
That's kind of democracy. That's called democracy. That's how you vote.
No, I mean, the 5 county commissioners chose the top 5 guys from the list.
That's what we're elected to do.
And then you
Yes.
also get to pick the winner of those 5.
Ma'am, it's not
so what I'm saying though is that
competition.
Matt Carpenter is not a suitable choice, much less should be one of the top 5.
That's the decision.
That's not the decision of this board.
If he doesn't know the
Now,
difference between a
Madam
creek and a
Chair,
trench. So to
call the
stand
question.
by reason, if you
You may
chose
sit down.
a man
You
who
may sit
doesn't know
down.
what he's talking
You
about.
may sit down.
Have a seat.
I'm not yelling at anybody.
It's either you're gonna have a seat or you're gonna leave.
Well, obviously,
Okay,
the
we have a motion
Walton
and a
County
second.
and political entity doesn't want to hear anything.
Remove her.
Take her out.
I am, don't touch me. Don't touch me, you do not have a right.
We have a motion and a second on the floor. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed, like sign.
Is there anybody else that wants to speak to that? Or?
I don't know.
I called the question.
He's called the question.
Commissioners, we will begin that process. We will contact Mr. Bourne. Excuse me? And we can do a couple of things. If he is, we would assume he's continued interested. We haven't heard anything to the contrary. If that's not the case, we can report back to you at the next meeting, or if we're successful in negotiations, we'll report that back. So be thinking that if for some reason that didn't happen, what you would like to do next, we could certainly go to the next candidate. We could go back out to advertise, or absent direction, we'll just bring you a report in 2 weeks.
As far as I'm concerned, for expediency, we need to get this done. This person needs to come on board and get familiar with our comp plan and our LDC, because we've got some work that needs to be done.
Yes, ma'am.
So if for some reason he doesn't want the position, then I think we move to the next person.
I agree.
Agreed. Okay.
Do we need a
So,
motion for that?
I think we have consensus. or
No, you
we
don't
want
need a motion.
Okay.
If you
So
miss the first one.
just to be clear, we will reach out to Mr. Bourne. If those negotiations are not successful, we will move to Ms. Shell as the next candidate.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioners.
What's the skate park?
Oh,
Number 18, the skate park. No, I didn't.
somebody's got my stuff. All right, we're going to go anyway. We'll work together. The next item is a request to approve to advertise an RFQ for the design build of the South Walton Skate Park at Helen McCall Park. This would get us moving in the process to expend the funds that we've have allocated for that, and the grants that we have, and the funds that the association has raised. This will be an RFQ, so we'll be looking at the appropriate qualifications for those to build that park. All this does is give us staff permission to move forward with the advertisement.
Motion to approve.
Have a motion, we have second?
Second.
Motion second. Any comments from the audience on the skate park? Okay. Mr. Brook, come on up.
Bob Brook, B-R-O-O-K-E. I just have a question, Mr. Chairman. Is this considered a services contract or an engineering services contract?
This is not a contract. This is simply a search for the most qualified firm based on qualifications to do a design build for the park. Once we have those that wish to submitted, they will be ranked based on their qualifications, either by the board or by the selection committee, as the board will decide that. Those firms, the next step would be to bring back a top-ranked firm to the board to begin negotiations for a contract to enter into.
Okay, now in this particular instance, price does not factor in an
At this point,
RFQ.
that's correct.
But in the
Perhaps-
actual build and construction part of the park, does price factor in?
Yes, sir.
I mean, is it a competitive pricing, or is it only when
Well-
you're negotiating with the person who's selected based on qualifications?
There are certain disciplines governed by statute that you do a request for qualifications. So the initial selection is based strictly on the qualifications of the firm. Once that top-ranked firm is selected, you negotiate with that firm. If you don't come to a successful negotiation that you think is in the reasonable price range, you can certainly kick that firm and go to the second-ranked firm. So
Okay.
this is the first step in that process.
But I understood that was based on service, that those were service-type contracts, not invitation for bids or construction jobs or things like that? Or
Separate-
am I misinterpreting that, Larry?
Well, they're separate processes. A request for proposal says, tell us how much you'll build this for.
Right.
An invitation for bid says, we want to buy 43 of these chairs, how much you sell us the chairs for.
Right.
A request for qualifications says, tell us why you're the most qualified firm or individual to produce these services. And those rankings determine who you negotiate with for those services. That's dictated by statute.
I understand that's a state statute, but is that more for services like studies, analysis, engineering drawings, or is that for actual construction?
There's a list of those type firms. If you'll notice, when we select an engineering firm, we do it on qualifications.
I understand. That's why
And
I'm
so this
asking
is
the
very-
question. That there's certain types of services where the only thing you have, there's no price involved, and you could have 5 qualified bidders or qualified respondents.
But
And you decide who's the best qualified.
In an RFQ, the initial response has no price or cost in it.
Understand.
Okay.
And you only negotiate price with the one person or one respondent who's selected.
At a time, yes, sir. If you
Well,
don't,
you don't even go on to anyone after the first one if you reach what I presume is some kind of an agreeable number.
that's correct.
So you don't know whether the next person could underbid that or not.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brooke. Okay, anyone else? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed, like sign.
Thank you, Commissioners. The next item is a request to approve the fiscal year 2016-17 capital project and road surfacing list. That list has been provided to you and reviewed with Public Works. We ask you to approve those so we can move forward.
Yeah, I'll make the motion.
Okay, motion, second?
Second.
Now, do you
But I
have?
want to say something, I guess, before after we vote.
Yes,
Mr.
go ahead, go ahead, talk.
In this is the Driftwood Draining Project, which at least 3 commissioners since I've been on board have been over Driftwood. Cecilia was there for a while, Cindy Meadows, and I have had it.
Is this one?
So in this phase 2 is included in the FY 16-17 TIF with a cost estimate of $85,000.
I believe that's the next one. We're on number 19.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay. So we
I
have,
was primed and ready.
so are you making your motion on number 19?
No, I'll make it on 19.
Okay,
I'll make it again on 20.
motion on 19, second.
Second.
Any comments from the audience? Okay, seeing none, yes, sir, come on up. We're on number 19, which is 16-17 capital projects. State your name, spell your last name.
Randy Powers, P-O-W-E-R-S. Madam Chair, at the bottom of the list is an item that says TIF drainage crew salaries.
On the bottom of my list, it says Maple Street intersection. We're on number 19.
Yeah, I was on the wrong list.
Oh, sorry.
Blame it on me.
I will.
You can
I
come
thought
back.
you-
Just a minute.
Okay.
Sit tight, because we'll be
All
right
right,
there.
all right.
Sit close. We'll get order.
All confusion has to go. Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed, like sign.
Thank you, Commissioners. The next item is the capital projects list for the tax increment financing district in South Walton. Again, that list has been provided to you and reviewed with Public Works. We respectfully request your approval.
Motion, we have a
Second.
second? Motion,
I
second?
think Commissioner Commander has something to add to that.
She does.
Yes, as we have been working on for years, the drainage and driftwood, and a lot of that has been, we've been sued a number of times and couldn't do a whole lot while we were being sued, but now we have the opportunity to use about $85,000 that will allow Public Works to do some of the improvements in driftwood, and their plans is to resurface the remaining roads in Driftwood Estates that have not been resurfaced. And this will come out of the 16-17 Public Works capital budget. But the $85,000 will help. We need to realign all of the driveways and the culverts around the exterior, which will allow that water to flow. A number of people in Driftwood have decided they want a flat yard, so they did away with the ditches, and water won't flow. So we're going to try to correct that and make it where everything will flow nicely in Driftwood. And that's one of the reasons I'm so excited about this TIF proposal, is because we can finally start doing something out there.
Okay, any other comments?
I think Mr. Powell had something.
Now, Mr. Powell.
Madam Chair, it says previously approved, the TIF drainage crew salaries. Was that money spent for a contract or a reimbursement?
That money is spent for county employees that are dedicated to these projects. When we began the TIF district last year before, we agreed that part of it would fund a drainage crew that would work specifically on the projects that are paid for out of the TIF funds. So it's an in-house crew that is directed to work on these projects as needed to supplement those works that are contracted out.
But Larry, if this crew is already budgeted at the beginning of the fiscal year, we're taking TIF money and moving it to those salaries. This is a crew that's already budgeted in the fiscal year 17 or 16 or 17 budget.
Buddy, would you come
Yeah,
up?
Buddy can help us out there. If I said something wrong, correct me.
Buddy Wright, Walton County Public Works. It is my understanding from talking to Melissa, we have to account for that 200,000 because this crew is indeed, dedicated to that crew. Now, 99% of the time they're working on the TIF. If we had some emergency that they had to go do something for Public Works, obviously they wouldn't be paid for out of this account.
Sure.
They'd be paid for out of the Public Works account, but that is exactly what that money's for.
And Mr. Powers, I can assure you, they're not being paid twice or accounted for twice.
No,
So-
but I'm saying the TIF money, really, when the spirit of TIF 2 years ago was for infrastructure,
Yes, sir.
and that included stormwater.
Correct.
It did not include salaries.
Well, the cost of those things obviously include somebody to do them.
But Larry, they're already in the budget.
Okay.
Those people are budgeted. If you got X number of people in public works,
Right, well, they're budgeted, but they're not budgeted out of the Public Works budget. They're budgeted out of the TIF. So basically, we're just showing where that $200,000 is coming from. It's gonna have to come out of the $4 million. So yes, they're being paid out of the TIF dollars, but being that this crew was put together 2 years ago, it's being funded out
And
of the
Melissa
TIF.
Thompson, I'm sure can straighten us all out.
If we
but-
don't have people to do the work, then there's no point in collecting the money for the TIF. Somebody's got to solve the problem.
And if y'all remember, when we started this, Public Works came up with, these are the projects we think we can economically do in-house if we had a drainage crew. So rather than contracting those out, we were going to do those in-house, and the salaries are just a part of doing the project, and the only portion of their salaries is what hits those work orders for those projects. So the cost of those projects are the only thing that are coming out of those TIF accounts. And they're employees that were not originally budgeted for public work. It's not like we have a regular public works crew and we're just taking and pulling them on TIF projects. It was a drainage crew. They were dedicated to those TIF projects. If they need to be pulled, if something comes up, and if they did have something they work on, say for a few hours, that was not a TIF project, they would key it to that work order. It would not hit the TIF account. It would hit Public Works.
Does that answer your question,
So
Mr. Powers?
the fund source then for that group, say there are 10 people or whatever, they are not included in your original budget.
They're not. No,
Okay,
sir.
that clears that up.
Okay.
Let me ask you, Madam Chair, if I could.
Sure.
The equipment that they're being funded for, that equipment stays here in South Walton as assigned to that shop
That's correct.
full-time?
And again, if there's any, I don't suppose we ever move it around, but if we did, we would bill the cost, make sure that the TIF project is whole. Is that?
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Any other questions about this project? Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed, like sign.
Thank you, Commissioners. Madam Chair, next is a request to approve Bob Sykes Road for 6.24 miles and Rock Hill Road Phase 1 from US 331 to Walton Bridge Road for funding consideration through the Small County Outreach Program, or SCOP. As you are all aware, those are state funds that we qualify for. We have to nominate roads and put the particulars for those roads into an application process. We're requesting your approval to submit these two for that consideration.
So moved.
Have a motion.
Second, and
Motion second.
clarification, that is, can only be used in North Walton on rural roads.
That's correct.
Cannot be used in South Walton.
Any comments from the audience?
Per state, not us, the state.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, like sign.
Next request is very similar. This is a request to approve County Road 181 East, or 7.8 miles, for funding consideration through the Small County Road Assistance Program, for SCRAP. Very similar program that we can utilize in the rural parts of the county. And again, we submit these roads for consideration. And we've been tip of the hat, Public Works, they're very successful in acquiring these funds, and it goes a long way in improving our roadway structures. So we request your approval.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion second. Any other comments from the commission? Comments from the audience? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed, like sign.
Thank you, Commissioners. The next request is to allow staff begin negotiations with a top-ranked firm, Genesis, in response to RFQ 017-005 for engineering services for the East Point Washington Road Realignment Project.
Make a motion, we move forward.
Have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion second. Any other comments, questions from the commission? Any comments from the audience? All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Thank you, Commissioners. The next item is a request to award invitation to bid 017-013 for steel H pilings for McKinnon Ridge Road Bridge replacement project to the low bidder Skyline Steel in the amount of $52,910.
Second.
A motion second. Any other questions? Questions from the audience? Okay, all in favor, say aye. Aye.
Thank you. The next item is a request to award invitation to bid 017-019, bridge material for McKinnon Bridge Road North and South to Conecuh Bridge and Engineering in the amount not to exceed $304,660.44.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion second. Any other comments? Comments from the audience? All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Thank you, Commissioners. At the last meeting, there was a request for you to consider Sugar Estates, Sugar Cove Lane to bring into county maintenance system. You directed staff to perform an analysis and make a recommendation for that. And Mr. Buddy Wright with our Public Works Department will present you with the results of those analyses and their recommendation.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. We did have staff go out and evaluate this particular road, and it does meet most of the requirements of Chapter 5. However, we did highlight some issues with the asphalt pavement and some of the drainage in the subdivision. So our recommendation would be to accept the road with the condition that the asphalt is repaired, resurfaced, that they can come to us and tell us what they want to do. And then the other is to basically upgrade the drainage so it takes care of any nuisance drainage in the neighborhood. That would be our recommendation to the board.
So, Commissioners, the crux of the recommendation is to present them with those improvements that need to be made to meet the terms and conditions of your approval. So it's not, we're certainly not saying that we're going to accept it today as in the conditions it's in, but if you do these things and we go back out and re-inspect it and you've done them appropriately, then it would be moved into the county maintenance system. Correct. And Buddy has be prepared to present to those individuals what those requirements will be.
And that is according to our accepting road policy.
Yes, ma'am.
Have you presented those yet, Buddy?
We've talked with Mr. Jenkins, so he's got some idea, and we certainly can continue conversations with him, whatever the board chooses for us to do.
I'll make a motion, we accept this recommendation.
Motion second. Any other comments? Comments from the audience? Ms. Boucher? Boucher? Whatever. Miss Lisa, how about that? Boucher. I just got it. Boucher.
Right, just call me Lisa, okay. That works easy.
All right.
It's really a question. Because I've sat through a couple of meetings where there's been discussions after the fact about assuming maintenance and what happens. Who all has, of the neighbors that live on this street have signed off on this kind of thing? Or is it just being presented by one or two people? Anybody know?
I'll ask Buddy. I'm not sure who all has been involved in the request. It's probably very limited.
We've dealt with Mr. Jenkins. I'm sure he could speak to that question specifically.
I ask because what I'd like to see avoided for this board is another instance similar to the Dalton Drive one, where, you know, a couple of people many, many years ago asked for the county to assume maintenance. It was voted to assume. It really sort of happened, sort of didn't. It creates problems for you all that can be avoided by doing certain things up front, like making sure that, for instance, when we wanted no parking signs on our streets, we had to get 80% of every owner on each of the streets that would have them. Well, by doing that, you at least know you've got 80% of those residents bought in. And it seems like when you're doing things like assuming maintenance, that could prevent tons of headaches down the road. So just a suggestion, if you're not doing it that way.
Lisa, if I may.
Yes, sir.
The petition for this request has 15 names on it.
Good.
And it looks like
I don't know.
Do you happen to know how many lots on
I
this?
have no idea, so I don't know how far they went down there to try to get a hold of everybody.
At least that's encouraging that it's not just 2 or 3, right?
Commissioner, it looks like there's 16 lots in the, 18 lots in the subdivision.
Well, then that sounds similar to what I would expect it to avoid later problems. So thank you. I appreciate that clarification.
Thank you. Lisa, thank you. That's a very good point. And maybe we should ask sometime the next time this comes up, and, you know, maybe we should ask for, hey, a petition or whatever signed by the people that live on that road.
Right. And just as a point of clarification, in our current policy, which Mr. Jenkins did follow, and I might have misspoke just a minute ago, it does require 75% of the adjoining property owners to sign off, and I think he got 15 out of 16. Yes, ma'am.
That answers that question. Thank you.
Thank you, Patty.
Any other comments from the audience? Yes, sir. Come on up.
I was just going to speak on behalf of Mr. Jenkins. We appreciate the board considering and hopefully approving this request. We'd just like to work with Public Works to quantify what we need to do and what the county is able to do to get the road paved. We appreciate your consideration.
We're able to accept it once all that has been done.
Okay, I just need to know what exactly needs to be done, and I guess I can get with Mr. Wright to consider that. Okay.
Thank you. Mr. Jenkins, did you want to say something?
Oh, yeah.
Yes, Michael Jenkins, and this road in question was put in back in '86, and it apparently was put in according to the standards, and there was a development order, and there was engineering reports done on it. So the road was put in according to county standards, and it is a public road. The neighborhood does not have a mechanism of any kind, nor does individuals such as myself have the ability to pay to have the road paved. It is a county road, and it was put in according to the standards, and we have documentation to support that. Mr. Burris could be more than happy to explain that further if he's given the opportunity.
Council?
Well, the recommendation, my understanding is currently not a county road.
It is a county road.
Well, then why would we be accepting it for maintenance?
It's a county road right now. It's been a county road since '86.
Buddy,
Mr. Jenkins is right. It's a public right-of-way.
Okay.
It's been dedicated on the plat. Right. However, the board has never accepted it for maintenance.
Okay. So it's not a county-maintained county.
That is a question we don't quite understand why it is not a maintained road. Everything was put in place. We have documentation to support that there was engineering studies done on it. It appears as though everything was satisfactory. It just never was officially included on a list. We have no idea why it was not. Neither does anybody in your staff understand why it was not. It just somehow fell between the cracks. Now, residents, tax-paying citizens of the county are being asked to pave a county road. That's what we have a hard time with. We can't comprehend that.
And Mr. Jenkins, legally, unless the county took some affirmative action at the board to accept the road, either through acceptance of a dedication, acceptance of a deed, or the county undertook maintenance for a period of time, then it is, despite the dedication, despite the offer, it is not a county road under the current Florida law. So that, if there was something in the records that indicated maintenance or indicated an acceptance, it would be a county road, but that's just not the case. I don't know why either, but it just wasn't.
Well, so what are what are we supposed to do with the road that is, it's not our road, it belongs to the public?
No.
It does belong to, it's dedicated to the public. It is the ownership of the county.
The dedication is like an offer, and unless the offer is accepted formally or through maintenance, it's not a completed contract.
It's accepted formally when it was signed by the board. I have a plat that's saying that the board signed it.
The board has to formally accept it. At the time of accepting the plat, it would say on the plat, we hereby accept dedication of these roads.
It does. I have a plat.
I don't know that.
I have a plat. I'll show you a plat. I'll be happy to. You have it right here. It was accepted.
Yeah, Mark, it was dedicated public on the plat.
Okay.
But the road was not accepted for maintenance.
Oh, okay. Well, that's the same thing. We have to formally accept the road for maintenance.
But it was never a reason why it wasn't accepted. That's what I don't understand.
Let me do this. Let me get with Buddy before we do anything, and let's make sure I understand the legal status of the road, because I'm not sure that I do right now.
If it wasn't brought to this board, and no matter how many years ago, and this board
Is it
accepted
a recorded subdivision?
then it wouldn't be.
Yes.
Okay, let me just take a look at the plat and talk to Buddy. We'll get back to you, Mr. Jones.
How would you get back to me then? Would it be another meeting or?
Yeah.
So I mean, we'd have another chance at a public forum?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and that would be another, I'll be
I
informed.
want to make sure I
by
understand the legal status of the road.
that. Okay.
I think they did. Yeah, one of you made a motion to,
Can we just do
Who
this? Can we
was it?
table the motion to the next meeting? Let me make sure I understand the status.
who made the motion? Yeah, you want to table?
Okay, I
Thank-
agree to table it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And we'll check. Buddy, I'll get with you next week.
Internship.
We're on 27.
Somebody's got
You got Mr. Fletcher want to speak?
Yes, sir, come on up. You're going to speak on the Sugar Estates, Sugar Cove.
Well, about county roads, this is near and dear to my heart, and Commissioner Commander's familiar with Fletcher, Fletcher. I'm sure you're accepting the ad valorem taxes from the 18 residences on that road. My position is, these are our citizens, and these roads, my little road that I moved on in '03, as you'll recall, Sarah, dirt road, the county maintained it. They would haul in dirt on a regular basis, level it out. It would rain and wash it into the bayous and into the canals, and that was just repeated on a very frequent basis. Finally got them to pave the road, save the county a ton of money. But my point is, these are citizens in this county that paying the taxes, and if you're not going to maintain the road, I think they should get a reduction in their taxes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioners, the next item is a request of approval for the Walton County Environmental Department to partner with Northwest Florida State College by providing an environmental science internship program. What this is Northwest Florida State College has opportunities for students to partner with outside entities that provide some expertise and learning opportunities for specific students through this internship. Melinda Gates would be the individual that the intern would work with on a weekly basis, and they receive credit for that time, and I think it's a good opportunity for us to partner with the college to let them come experience some of the things we deal with on a regular basis, and we'd recommend your approval.
And no cost to us?
No, sir.
Okay, I'll make a motion, we accept that.
And I'll second. The only other question does Melinda say she has the time to help?
Yes, ma'am.
Good.
In fact,
But I think it's a good program.
She submitted the agenda item, so she's all on board.
Any questions from the audience, comments? Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye. 28. Next item is a request to advertise and hold a public hearing on March 28, 2017 at 9 a.m. in the Phoenix Springs Courthouse to bring forward $50,000 into the FY17 Debt Service Fund budget to repaint pilings at the 331 Bridge Park. If you recall, at the last meeting, we discussed the need to paint those pilings, preferably with a graffiti-resistant paint. If you had an opportunity to look at the park, it's going to be very nice, and this will allow us the ability to keep it that way, to keep the graffiti from being sprayed off with paint. So this is simply a public hearing to utilize those excess bridge funds to fund that project to paint those pilings.
I make so motion.
Second.
Motion second, any
Yeah.
other comments?
Just, I'd like to comment just a second. Those pilings already have graffiti
Yes,
on
sir.
them, and we have a really, really nice park. We have this money from the leftover money from the bridge, and it has to be spent on things for the bridge, and I think this is a good start for us to keep this park really nice.
Will this paint cover up the graffiti that's
Yes,
already there?
ma'am.
Okay. All right, we have a motion second. Any comments from the audience? Yes, sir, Mr. Crook.
Bob Rook, just a quick question. Is $50,000 a budgeting estimate, or is that a proposed cost from a contractor?
It's a budgeting estimate at this point.
Thank you.
Okay, we have a motion and second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Madam Chairman, while we're on this topic about we're using these funds, I'd like to take another look. I think we have approximately $6 million maybe in that fund, at doing something on the north end. We were looking at property at one point. We kind of stopped. Is there any reason why we stopped, or can we?
We kind of paused, so I
Yeah,
don't
we
want to say
paused, yeah.
stop. Waiting on the progress of the bridge to get it moved forward. When our conversation with DOT, they had some very significant concerns of getting anything involved with Skanska and or the bridge project until that project was complete. We think we're getting to that point. And to that end, we actually reached out to some of the property owners last week to determine, their desire to sell and pricing and stuff. And if you notice, the price on the sign of that one particular property went up about $125,000 in the last couple of months, but that's the reality, and that's where it is. We have, if you recall, we have appraisals on there. There were 5 parcels on the west side and 1 parcel on the east side. And quite frankly, the appraisals are about 50 to 60% of the asking prices, which, with the understanding that we're very limited on what we can use those bridge funds for, that probably wouldn't be as big a hindrance as it would normally be. So at your direction, we'll begin moving forward on any and all, and just kind of see where it lands.
I'd like to see us move forward.
I would too. I happened to go look at the parcel. I think it's 2.14 acres.
Yes, ma'am.
From what I understand, there was already a marina or something. Definitely was already there years ago.
So could you bring us something back at the DPNIAC meeting?
Certainly.
Thank you. Thank you.
Larry, while you're reaching out, I do not recall the people we met, me and you met down there at the piece of property that y'all talking about. I don't know if they'll be interested in offering what we did before, if we can get the purchase of the land.
Okay.
Or they'll come in there and develop that park as we talked about, so just an option.
That'll be one of the things we check into.
Mr. Tusa? Mr. Tusa?
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Commissioners. Ryan Kellenberger is going to take the first agenda item for the TDC, and then I'll be up to address the next 2 items. Yeah, we coordinated, I'm sure.
We were looking at the 2 shirts.
Good afternoon, Madam Chairman, Commissioners. I'm Brian Kellenberger, Director of Beach Operations. Appreciate your time. Our piece of business this afternoon is review and approval of Task Order TDC 17-003 proposal from Genesis Engineering. This is for development order services, design and permitting, and contract administration for the design development of the new regional beach access on the Dune Island property we purchased earlier this year. Cost is $120,610, and it is the complete start to finish development order, all the work associated with that, the design and permitting for the parking lot and structure, as well as bid preparation, and then contract administration services after the bid for construction is let.
And how many parking spaces were there?
Pardon me? Oh,
in the parcel?
Well, that hadn't been completely defined yet. The original plan that we used when we purchased it actually had more parking spaces than I would recommend on that.
Okay.
Mainly because it needs some more landscaping and appropriate size restroom facility on it. In the end, there will probably be approximately 40 to 48 spaces.
Wow. That'd be very helpful.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, do I have a motion?
So moved.
Motion second?
Second.
Okay, any other questions from the commission? Any questions, comments from the audience? Okay, seeing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Commissioners. I wanted to give a brief update on the real estate that we've been talking about for several months now and ask for some direction from the board. We have received the majority appraisals back on the properties that you approved us to do so. We're missing one on the Miramar Beach property. So we were told we'd get it in time for today's meeting, and we just did not receive that one. But we do have one on that property. So I wanted to give an update also on the Highland House property. We've kind of been going back and forth on that property for some time now, trying to figure out if we were able to get across that property. If you see on this picture here up on the screen and in the handouts that I handed to you, Parcel C is Dr. Elamon's property, and it goes from the bottom there at the beach and kind of wraps around the property. Kind of strange configuration there, but we're trying to figure out a way to get across that property. And Mark Davis has discovered that we can get across that property. So we wanted to see if you wanted to move forward with the process for Parcel A, the Highland House property. And I did want to let you know this as well. It has come to my attention that Parcel C, Dr. Elamon's property, has gone up for sale. So I wanted to see if there was any interest there in us looking at that property to see how we can work in conjunction with Parcel A, the Highland House property, and how we could use those two parcels together to get people to the beach. You know, I think obviously having that property, that little strip is about 15 feet that you look at on Parcel C over on the eastern side of that property. That's a 15-foot strip of property there. So we could certainly build a boardwalk to get from the Highland House property down to the beach. And you can see E is the beach that we own. There's about 1,000 feet of beach down there. It's about 4 acres of property that we own. So, you know, I think this is an important piece of property that we look at, that we can get access to the beach that we already own.
So if we were just looking at the Highland House, when I went out, I physically went out and met with some constituents out there. It appeared that there was no way to but so give me an update on
Yes, ma'am. It took a lot of digging and truly a surveyor to survey the resolution, all the descriptions in the resolution when some of that property was abandoned by the county. Once we got the surveyor, we determined that the easement, that the strip of land on the north side, I guess, what would be Parcel C, the upper left-hand corner of that strip of land was not abandoned during the resolution. So we still have an easement in the upper northwest corner. Quite frankly, it literally took a surveyor to draw that out for us because the descriptions were incredibly confusing. But we're confident that easement exists. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and it comes from the Parcel A through that 15-foot strip and comes down south of there. There's a little odd-shaped piece of property there. Who owns that? Is that the counties?
The B parcel is the counties.
B parcel is the counties, yes.
Oh, well, okay, I got it. It comes all the way down to ties into the beach.
Ties into that Parcel E, correct.
Does our county property go on each side of the stream?
Yes, it runs from B to E, doesn't it, Mr. Dixon?
The stream kind of runs in between B and C. If you kind of look in there where the property line is, it's kind of right in the middle of there. It looks like it's a little bit more on our property than it is on C, but it's, you know, that kind of goes with the flow. I mean, it moves a little bit. So by looking at that aerial, it looks like it's a little bit more on ours, but it's probably pretty much in the center of those two properties.
Has anybody reached out to the doctor to see if he concurs with this analysis that you got, Mr. Davis?
No, I have not, Mr. Chapman. I have not.
Jay?
I have not either, but the real estate agent for Highland House has been in contact with Dr. Elamond, and my understanding is that Dr. Elamond recognizes that easement, and I suspect that's probably why he's putting his house up for sale. That's just my thoughts.
And there's been no objections to its use for a long, long time.
Right. But would there be a necessity if A was purchased with access to the public beach, the necessity to spend another 3 points whatever on property C?
You know, I think that we could possibly use the dollars elsewhere. You know, we obviously have the easement so we can get across from A to B. You know, we do have that little bit of outflow there from that creek. That could be an issue, but I think we could work around that with some type of a little bridge. And it's my understanding they used to have a bridge there before. So I think that it is something that we could address.
Jay, the parcel that has no letter to it, just below A, is that a house there? Because it might...
The letter A is over that whole parcel. So if you look at Highland House, if you look at the building and the parking lot, behind there's a little bit of just green space. So that property goes all the way to that yellow line. So that's all. The bottom of the A. Yeah. So that's all Highland House property.
Okay.
If we bought Highland House and we use the access that Mark has been telling us about, would that put us on, which side of the outfall would that put us on?
That's going to put us on the western side of that outfall.
Okay, so we would have to have a way to get over the outfall to get to our property. That was one of the concerns when
Correct,
I was out
because
there.
if you look at the pie shape of the beach there, you know, it's obviously narrower in that end where we own that. So, you know, if you did have C, you'd be putting people on the the eastern side, of that little creek, and you know, obviously you'd have access to more of the beach there, a little more easily. Obviously, they wouldn't have to traverse that little creek.
Right up from B, where the letter B, is that, there's that strip that's about this wide. Is there something on there? I'm just, or am I not looking? Yeah.
Is that homeowner know we're coming? Yeah. What I'm getting at, I guess what I'm
Yeah,
trying to say.
right up from the letter B. Is
Yeah.
that a house?
It is a house.
And is
It
that
is a house.
Dr.?
And that is not Dr. Elamond. Dr. Elamond's property is C.
Is C.
Yeah.
So whose is B?
I'm not sure, ma'am.
Okay.
And then our that boardwalk runs right along the side of there.
So we would be coming by Mr. B on the left side to get to the beach. Is that what you're saying?
We're coming by there now.
Oh,
There's already a beach
We have
access
an
there.
Oh, okay.
There's a boardwalk there.
All right, okay.
But what we're saying is we would end up on the beach and our citizens would have to cross the outfall to get to the public beach.
They
So-
do now, right?
Yeah.
They do now.
They did. But, you know, right now it's a neighborhood beach access, and what we're proposing is a regional beach access. So the volume of people would be greater than certainly what's traversing there on a neighborhood beach access.
And could that be solved by a little bridge?
I think it could be. Brian, do you want to address that?
And
While Brian's coming up here, Jay, can the house on parcel A be
that my-
retrofitted to be for the regional access?
I haven't seen it on the inside. The outside looks pretty rough to me, so I would suspect probably not. We could certainly investigate that and report back to you on that, but like I said, it's a little rough looking from the outside.
Okay.
First of all, it's a drainage creek. It's not really an outfall, and it differs in size during amounts of rainfall. It takes a pretty good amount of rainfall to get it to make of any size where you can't get across it. Building a bridge across it down the flat portion of the beach would be pretty tough. DEP would probably not allow that, so I'd leave it just like it is. We don't get many or really any complaints about it being non-accessible. The bridge that used to go across it was by the Highland Home in their wedding services, so the brides wouldn't have to trip through the creek. So, as far as the house up there, I would demolish it and build a appropriate size restroom that meets our current design standards. Putting houses in a dumpster is fairly cheap.
I make a motion that we allow Mr. Tusa and his staff to move forward and investigate this and get some appraisals and let's see where it goes. We don't have to make this decision tonight. Let's just see where it goes.
Is there an interest there for the Elamon property as well, or just the Highland House property?
You know, I think we check on it just to be, just to see what it is. I mean, it doesn't hurt to check.
If you don't ask, you don't know.
Exactly.
And then we prioritize, like I said, the
Well, and-
accesses that we need to buy
Right.
based on.
Well, and that's what I wanted to ask about as far as prioritizing. I went back to Melissa. We met a couple of months ago, and we determined that we have about $16 million to spend. And I double-checked with her, and we're still good with that figure. So out of the properties that we're looking at right now, they're totaling, including the Elamon property, about $28 million. So obviously, we're going to have to prioritize because we don't have enough money to buy all of these. So, I don't know if you want me to start negotiating with some of these folks and trying to get some figures together, or if you want to wait till these appraisals come back on the Highland House property. Whatever y'all like to do is fine with me.
I'm very interested in maybe even a contract on the Miramar Beach property, and then maybe a workshop to see what else we want. But we really, really need something at Miramar Beach, and I think this would be a terrific deal if we could do a contract on it.
And I concur.
Okay. Well, I can certainly begin negotiations with that owner and that agent, and then bring that back to you at the next meeting in Definiak.
Is that a, you want
I
me to make
can't
that
make a
motion?
motion. I do.
I make that motion.
We have a
we
motion
do?
on the floor.
Uh-oh. Yeah, let's do that one first.
Okay, motion to go out for appraisals for the Elamon and Highland House, was that your motion? And then second? Okay, any comments from the audience? Mr. Brooks?
Who seconded that? You just seconded
I thought you seconded.
No, I
You
made
it.
the motion.
I second.
She seconded.
We got a motion and a second.
She did.
Mr. Brooks?
Just a quick question on, would parking be on property A there?
It would be.
And how many spaces?
We haven't determined that yet, but that's something we can look at and bring that back when we bring back the other information.
Looks like we could get a pretty substantial amount of parking.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, because obviously that house is pretty big, so when you reduce that size footprint for a bathhouse, and then the green space in the back, we could probably push parking, back there as well. So I think we can get some nice parking out of there.
Well, the photo has got 8 or 10 cars already parked in there.
Right. So I think we can come up with a rough estimate for you, and that way it help you evaluate it when we bring back the appraisals.
Okay, and then I'll make the next motion
Okay,
to.
so let's vote on this
Oh,
one.
we haven't voted.
Motion and a second, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And then I believe it's Ms. Mims wants to come up and speak. Yes, come up. Yes, thank you for being on the Customary Use Committee. Y'all really worked hard, and it was really appreciated.
Tammy Mims, MIMS. I just want to say thanks for letting me be on there and choosing me. And also, the growing rate of the state of Florida, it's going to be astronomical. I lived on the beach growing up for 16 years. All my family lives on either the Gulf Coast or the Atlantic. We've all sold but two. And the growing population of Florida, all these properties, these little parcels, we need all of them. And it's not about us. It's about our future generations and what's to come. I have never seen a hearse hauling a house. None of y'all saying it, will you? So, but thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Mims. And there's some more people. I know I see Lisa back there that was, raise your hand if you were on the committee. In fact, just stand up if you were on the committee. We want to thank you so much publicly. Thank you all. And I look forward to having the workshop in Definiak to talk about results. I'm just amazed that I didn't expect us to ever come together on this. So at least we have some dialogue, and we know the issues on both sides. So sorry to interrupt, but that was needed. Okay, so now we have a motion for the Scenic Gulf Drive property.
Yes.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Motion second. Any comments, other comments? Comments from the audience? All in favor, say aye. Aye. So begin negotiations on that.
Great. And then for the other properties, do you want to wait with the negotiations until we get the Highland House property back for all the kind of the 30A stuff? Or do you want me to kind of start some dialogue with some folks at this point?
Do you think you would have it ready for the Definiak meeting so we could have a workshop?
Yeah, I think I can talk to everybody and at least kind of start the dialogue and see where we can negotiate, and at least to be a starting point, and I can bring that back to you. And if I need to go back and kind of counter offer, it gives us an opportunity to have a little more time to work with some of those folks, I think.
Sounds good.
So,
There hasn't been any appraisals on these properties here?
no, sir.
Okay.
No, sir. Hopefully we can get those back by the Defuniak meeting. I'll get with Dee Dee and Glendale, and we'll see if we can get those done rather quickly.
Do you have any updates?
I do. Just very briefly, wanted to update you on the January numbers. We had a little bit of an increase, 4.11%, for a total of $457,779.71. So right now we're up year over year with our numbers at 15.1%. So, obviously the fall and winter is usually a little slow, but it's nice to see that we still have a 15% increase over last year. And, those numbers were an increase over the year before. So we're still building in those shoulder seasons, and that's a very good thing because obviously I think we can use a little more business in the shoulder seasons, help drive our economy. So.
Maybe we should have a new advertising slogan for spring break. Come down and tan your goosebumps. It is cold out there.
It is.
Any questions for me? No? Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Davis, you didn't have anything tonight? Mr. Davis?
No, ma'am, I noticed the number of closeout judicials you had, so I know we don't have anything.
Okay, thank you. All right. Commissioner Tony Anderson?
Yes, I request to appoint Tom Badcock to the District 5 Planning Commission appointing.
Is that a motion?
That's a motion.
I'll second.
Motion second. Any other comments? Comments from the audience? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Commissioner Commander?
Yes, I am sure all of y'all have heard about House Bill 17, trying to preempt the authority of local governments. We have been asked by the Florida Association of Counties to have a resolution opposing this. It's taking more and more away from local governments and local people, and I would ask that we adopt a resolution opposing House Bill 17.
Is this a motion?
Yes, sir.
Second.
Have a motion second? Yes, sir.
For those that's sitting out there in the audience, if you're not familiar with these two bills in the House and on the Senate, basically what they are doing is saying the state can do it better in Tallahassee than we can do it here at the local level. And if these bills pass, everything dealing with signage, scenic corridor standards, all of those issues, beach activities, whatever, would be preempted by the state, and we would no longer have any ability to take your concerns and put them in the form of some type of regulation to address issues. So my request to y'all is to reach out to Brad Drake, Senator Gaynor, Mr. Ponder, anybody that you know in the State House or the State Senate, and ask them to not support this bill as it's presently presented, because it will really have a major impact on the county and your sales. Thank you.
Any other comments from the audience? All in favor of the resolution, say aye.
Aye.
Commissioner Dipper?
No, ma'am.
Vice Chair Mr. Chapman?
I have nothing, thank you.
Okay, and I have nothing tonight. All right, let's move to citizens' request. Mr. Thornton, thank you so much for that wonderful prayer earlier.
Thank you for being allowed to do that. I'm Mike Thornton, Thornton, and coming to ask the board for permission, approval to allow us to do a free community Easter egg drop over at Helen McCall Park, and we want to drop 5,000 Easter eggs filled with candy and toys from a helicopter, and we would like permission to do that.
Okay. Do we have any questions?
What's the elevation or altitude they'll be at to make the drop?
They will be, I do not know for sure. It will not be a very high elevation, but whatever the flight pattern. We have chose a company to do this that has done many of them. Actually, they're on the actually doing one over in Bay County for a city community, I believe maybe Lynn Haven, Panhandle Helicopter on Panama City Beach. They've done multiple ones. We have looked at different companies, but we felt secure to ask and go with one that has done it many times for safety concerns. We also chose specifically Helen McCall Park because the soccer field on the end has a fence that we can keep the kids behind the fence while the helicopter, it'll make one pass over, it'll come back over, and it'll drop the eggs on the field. And once they're all on the ground, we'll let the kids out to go pick them up. So, but yes, sir, I'm sorry, I do not know specifically.
Just wanted to know the separation between the chopper and the kids on the ground.
I do know that they have to, they'll, as they come across, they'll get, airspace permission and things like that as well. But
Any other questions? Questions from the audience?
We have no motion.
Ain't got a motion yet.
I make a motion, we
Second.
allow this.
Motion and second. I would if I could, but I can't. I mean, I could pass it down. So motion and
We have motion
second.
and second.
Any comments from the audience now? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Thanks for doing this. I will be there with my grandkids.
yes,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sharon, we have one more and then okay, Sharon Lindgren from, I'll let you explain your issue.
Hi, my name is Sharon Lindgren, and I live on Joe Catherine Lane.
I'm sorry, ma'am, will you spell your last name?
Oh, Lindgren, Lindgren.
Thank you.
And back in December, my neighbors had moved out of the property next door to me, and I was, I had asked them why they were leaving, and they said they were having a rat problem. And when I saw no activity by the owner next door, I called code enforcement and I called the health department, and they had sent some people out, but there was nothing that anybody would do because there's nothing that has to do with codes enforcing a rat problem. The house is infested with rat and fleas. I've called the owner and asked her to do something because you could see them running all over the front porch. The previous owners left, or the previous tenants left all of their belongings in there, their clothing, their food, everything in the house, and they just left. And the owners haven't done anything about coming over. And I called her, like I said, and then I even went to Tony Anderson's office on February 23rd, talking to the people there, and they said, there's nothing. You have no codes on the books for taking care of anything like absentee landlords, when the property has just been abandoned. We have 3 abandoned properties on our street, and it looks terrible. And Anna Reichert came out, and they said the only thing that they could do from code enforcement, the only thing they said that they can do is take care of the trash that's on the street. Now, the previous tenants have left large garbage cans filled with trash on the front porch. And last week, the electric company came out and shut the power off. And if there's any food in that refrigerator, it's going to start stinking. So what I'm asking you guys to do is something to have to do with absentee landlords, some kind of code enforcement. It has to do with rats. I mean, that's going to be a problem here pretty soon. Nothing's been done with that property, and the owner lives 6 minutes away, and nothing's been done with that property in the 7-8 years that she's owned it.
Okay. Madam Chair, we had some issues like this over the few decades back when I was with the sheriff's office. I would ask staff to look into the nuisance ordinance and see if it's applicable and whether we can take some action against the property owner with that.
Yeah, they came and cleaned up the trash along the street, and code enforcement said that's all they could do. Is if they clean up the trash along the street, there's nothing. I mean, there's broken glass.
That's based upon the way the ordinance is written.
Oh, I know.
Okay.
Yeah.
Give us a chance to try this.
Okay.
We may be able to do something by going to using this particular statute. It's a state statute, and we'll let council research it and see if it's applicable as a health issue, nuisance to the neighborhood.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a hop, skip, and a jump from that house to my house, and, there's fleas all over the rats. And
Get you some feral cats for right now.
well, there are. I mean, believe me, they were out there in force last night, so that's why I haven't bothered trapping the cats.
Ms. Lindgren, if we will find some solution to your
Yeah.
problem.
I tell you what, you can go back to that Joe Pesci movie where the judge made him live in the apartment that was, and
Exactly.
make her live in there for a week.
Let us investigate, see what we can do, see what other counties
Yeah.
have done
Yeah.
with this. I certainly feel your pain, and I wouldn't want to be living next door there.
Well, the owner lives in a gated community 6 minutes away, and when I mean gated, I mean it's got wrought iron gates and a brick wall, and I'm sure she's not going to bed at night wondering if there's rats coming in her house because the neighbors ran out of food. And that's what I'm worrying about every day.
You know, it's not only, and I appreciate, it's not only this problem with the rats, but we have had problems multiple times, especially after the boom and then everybody came down, with houses that were abandoned and left half-built with, you know, so maybe, I don't know how we go about it, but maybe we can look into how can we, and it's like the banks, when the banks take them over, I don't understand why the banks don't want to keep them in repair, because you think they'd want to sell them, but, well, you can't get money out of a building that's dilapidated. But we do have a problem all over the county about, you know, places that have been abandoned and that sort of thing. So might be worth looking into again, seeing what we can, you know, and people talk to me all the time about the way things look on the highways and all. I realize a lot of our highways are state or federal highways, but, you know, the buildings that front them and look like not so good, I think maybe it comes under our problem too, you know.
So we'll look into it. Thank you for sharing that with us.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Do we have any other public comments? This can be 3 minutes of anything not on the agenda. Excuse me, the gentleman in the blue shirt, you may come first.
Alan Fakira. I was not able to make the last meeting that was up in Defuniak. And from what I hear, you have made a decision to purchase some property in Freeport to move the building department or planning department to this particular location. And I was trying to get a little clarity on what your ultimate intentions are to be done with this property. Because what I've heard is that you were going to shut down the office down here on the south end of the county, where the majority of the building is happening, and force us to go up to Freeport for our permitting process.
Mr. Vaccaro, in this process of looking at the Freeport property specifically, there's never been any decision made that there would be no planning or building activities here and/or in Defuniak Springs. Probably quite to the contrary, that the board is very cognizant of the needs of the people and where those needs are. However, there is also a need to be able to be efficient in our operations. There are certainly some efficiencies, and I think if you look at some of the reports that have been done on the planning department of late, to consolidate in one facility. So I think the effort, and this will be at board direction, but I think the effort you will see will be to consolidate most of those activities if we do indeed procure that property in Freeport, which is still in the negotiation stage. But to make it as least impactful for citizens, either through electronic abilities to submit plans and permits and those type of things, or a minimal presence in each of the locations to be sure there's always the ability to service the needs, at least to the point of receiving documents and delivering documents at both ends of the county. So while those things have not been completely vetted and there's no hard, firm plan, I believe I've heard enough from the board to know that they don't want this to be a hardship for anyone.
I would certainly hope you would consider that in the future, because, I mean, that's what you're doing right now. I'm a builder. I submit to the planning department for construction and the building department. And most of the stuff that's submitted down here, it goes right up north to be reviewed and then comes back down. But it would be a hardship on our part to have to drive all the way back, you know, out of the area, general area where we're doing the construction, when so much of that construction is being done down in here.
Do you do yours by internet or do you physically take it?
I physically have to take it down there.
Okay. All right. We've had discussion about making sure that we're covered here and covered in the north end, as well as have our planning staff under one roof as well. So we'll make sure. Thank you for bringing that to our attention. We'll do everything we can to make sure that you're accommodated.
Yeah, it has to be done. You have to physically do it because the requirements that you have is that they be submitted in documents that are either in rolled up plans along with a disc or in 11 by 17 sheets and so forth. And that's something that you can actually do electronically.
And, you know, another point, Madam Chairman, is that we're not saying this is going to be permanent, but we have to do something now. We're under a mandate to do something with our planning department. Rhonda Skipper is literally having some of her people sit out in the hall. The clerk's office is running out of space. So we have to do something to solve these problems, because it's not only the planning department in this building, it's everybody else. And so I don't think any of us see that is that the planning department is going to be in Freeport forever. But unless somebody in this room has over $12 million in their back pocket that they want to help build a building here, then we've got to say do something temporary until we can get the funds and all, and then start building on the second building that was intended for this building, you know, for this property all along. You know?
Another quick question. I'm not familiar with Freeport's process. Somebody's mentioned to me that they have their own building department, but they don't have a planning department, or does anybody know that?
They don't have a building department.
They have their own planning department.
I think it's just the opposite.
Their own planning.
They have their own planning, but not building department.
That's correct.
That's what we issue building.
Yeah.
Well, having a place down here in the south end to submit our stuff, I think is very important.
Yeah, isn't that
Okay, do we have any other public comments? In the gentleman in the back, way back in the back, come on up.
Hi, Commissioners. I'm actually here for another thing later. Curtis Smith, that's my name. But this is more of just a public question. Sometime back, I sent Commissioner Meadows, before she departed us, a sketch for parking at the public parking lot on the south side of 393. I believe she said that was forwarded to TDC, but I never really heard anything back. They even offered some free engineering services to take that on for them. But the south side of 393 parking lot has some unused space for parking that I would like to make sure TDC or someone's looking into. In the sketch, I just pulled up GIS dimensions and kind of just laid everything out as a civil engineer would. And I believe there's at least 2, maybe 4 parking spaces that can be picked up simply by restriping that lot. So I would recommend that you guys do that as we grow and traffic and parking becomes a problem.
Thank you very much. Any other public comments?
Yes, ma'am.
Excuse me, no other public comments. You may come forward now.
Thank you, Ms. Jones. My name's Linda Morse. Last name is Morse. And I have a couple things that I want to make as a matter of public record. One of them is a phone call that I received from an attorney in Tallahassee that's representing Dave Kryka. Mr. Kryka's attorney informed me that the $300 bill that you submitted to the board had nothing to do with county business whatsoever. It had everything to do with campaign contributions that you allegedly took before you were ever elected.
Is she
we didn't
talking,
owe that bill.
Excuse me, is she talking about the consent agenda that you put on the consent agenda?
Yes, ma'am. You were, as you probably know, you were subpoenaed to testify in a deposition. I received a copy of the subpoena. It was a fairly short turnaround. As I advise every commissioner who gets that type of subpoena, we were not a party to this case, as you probably know. You will have to hire your own attorney. Our office can't represent you individually. We can't do that. We're not allowed to represent you individually. So if the county is involved in the case, if we're a named defendant, we appear. But if you want individual representation, that's up to you. Under Florida law, it's fairly clear that, well, it's not fairly clear, it is clear, that if the testimony has anything to do, whether we're a party or not, has anything to do with your official duties as a county commissioner, then when you hire the attorney and you receive a bill, and you pay the bill, you're entitled to be reimbursed with approval of the county commission. When I contacted, I got a copy of the bill, a copy of the receipt where you had paid it. I put it on the, no I didn't. I contacted the attorney that Ms. Jones had hired, and based on the questions and answers I had with him, I was reasonably confident that not reasonably confident, I was confident that, I sound like a lawyer, don't I? I was confident that enough of the questions had to do with your official duties that I put it on the consent agenda to be paid, like I've done more than before. Commissioner Jones contacted me and said, hang on a second, let's read the deposition and make sure. So we've ordered it, so I took it off the agenda. And I think we received the deposition yesterday, Commissioner, I'm not sure. So we're going to read the deposition, make positively sure, and then make a decision if we're going to resubmit for payment.
And again, this happened prior to her ever being elected. So she was
No,
right.
no, ma'am. No,
She
ma'am.
was right in hiring a private attorney.
Yes, ma'am.
And she was right in paying that attorney. It's not a bill that we owe, and it's not one that should have ever been on the agenda. That aside, I'm done with that comment.
We will
Okay, ma'am, I was the county commissioner when I gave that deposition. It was the end of my term.
I'm not talking about when you gave the deposition, ma'am. I'm talking about when you took the campaign
Okay,
contributions.
what's your next?
You were campaigning.
What's your next issue?
This is about yesterday. I wasn't able to attend that meeting. I'm just a little put out that the county spent all this money on representation in that issue. And my comment is, just imagine how strong this county could be if the BCC spent their time working for the people who elected you instead of the people who bought you.
Okay, we'll now, thank you very much for those comments. We'll now take about a 20-minute break. Thank you.
Quick.
Okay.
I was able to get some information on Commissioner Chapman's question earlier on parking at Highland House, and it's 50 spots.
50 spots.
50 spots.
Thank you very much. Okay, take a recess. Order. Mr. Davis.
We're about to undergo the quasi-judicial items on our docket. Anyone who anticipates testifying or speaking to the board on any item on the quasi-judicial docket, would you please stand and raise your right hands to be sworn? Do each of you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you will give to this board will be the truth? Thank you. Commissioners, have you received any ex parte contacts regarding any item on the quasi-judicial docket?
I haven't
Yes.
turned them in.
I have turned them in.
Haven't turned them in.
Turn them in.
All five commissioners have indicated they have, and they've turned them in to the clerk of court. Commissioners, of any of those ex parte contacts would prevent you from rendering a fair and impartial decision on any of these items?
No.
Each commissioner is indicating no. When you come to speak, we would ask that you tell us that you have been sworn, and if you would, spell your last name for the clerk, so we'll have a nice clean record in our minutes. Mr. Jones.
Thank you, Counselor. Commissioners, the first items we will attend to are two requests for continuances. The first one will be number 2 in the packet with Thomas Lavin, small-scale amendment. They have requested to continue to April the 11th, 2017.
Motion to move to April the 11th.
Second.
Motion and a second. It's on. Now, can you hear? We have a motion and a second. All in favor of the continuation, say aye. Aye.
And the second one is number 4, Santa Rosa Place Apartment replat. Is a request to continue to April the 11th, 2017.
So moved.
Second. Motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you, Commissioners. The first item for your consideration is Seclusion Cove small-scale amendment.
Excuse me a second, Mr. Jones. I have a conflict of interest on this project, and I filed the proper paperwork with the courts, with the clerk, so I will not be voting on this.
Thank you, Commissioner. Again, Seclusion Cove small-scale amendment. This is a request to approve by ordinance. The project is being reviewed by Christine Semmelman. This is a small-scale amendment application submitted by O'Connell and Associates Consulting Engineers, requesting to amend the future land use designation from small neighborhood to low-density residential on 6.36 plus or minus acres. The project is located 200 feet past the cul-de-sac on John's Way off of Hideaway Circle and identified by the parcel ID numbers contained in your board book. This was continued from the February 14th BCC meeting. It was approved by the Planning Commission on January 12th. with the condition that the Seclusion Bay Homeowners Association to resolve all issues before coming to the board and enter into a developer's agreement limited to 4 lots. And it's my understanding that agreement has been executed and delivered.
That's correct.
Then the motion carried at the Planning Commission. So Sam, turn it over to you.
Okay. If you have any questions, we pretty much covered it. I'm glad to answer. I did make some extra copies of the agreement if you.
And Commissioners, let me say, the developer's agreement is, there was one submitted, I made a significant number of changes. They accepted all the changes, and it has been signed by the owner of the property.
Good. And you have no problems with this?
I do not.
Okay.
Sam, on the archaeological, it says that the, indicates the subject site contains both archaeological site and phase 1, phase 2 field survey. Is that a problem for us that it hasn't been,
We do, the code does say that if there is any significant site that the state recognizes that there is a 50-foot buffer that would have to be around the site at the time of development.
okay, so it's been acknowledged?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
Presentation from the applicant.
Applicant?
Yes, my name is Lois Lasser on behalf of the applicant. It's L-A-S-E-U-R. As I think you can tell, this is a little tiny piece of property at the end of a very long road that it goes through a gated subdivision. The owner has already got, and in fact, when the property that subdivision is on was originally sold, the person who kept the property that we're looking at tonight kept an access easement through that property. So he has access to the property. Obviously, small neighborhood is a very uncomfortable fit for a land use designation for a piece of property that is, you would have to drive through a long winding road through a gated subdivision to get there. Because small neighborhood allows 10 units to the acre and requires, not allows, but requires a commercial component. What our client would like to do is put 4 single-family homes on this 6-acre piece of property. And he's willing not only to ask for 4 units to the acre, which would be 24 units, but actually enter into a development agreement that would run with the property that would ultimately limit anyone who purchases this property to 4 single-family homes in a carriage house. We've worked some with the Homeowners Association at Seclusion Code. We haven't really reached an agreement with them yet. It looks at this point like the developer will probably form his own association, but we're still working out an agreement with the Seclusion Code Homeowners Association. We're still negotiating with them, looking at maybe a contribution agreement where he would then contribute a certain portion to upkeep of those parts of the infrastructure that he would be utilizing. We haven't worked those details out yet, but we are still working with them.
Is this condition again with the carriage house, like the mother-in-law suite like we had last time? Is that an issue? And Lois, I want to say that because I didn't see it in here regarding a carriage house in the packet.
I believe it was four single-family homes.
4 single-family homes, or we conditionally?
4 single-family lots, which in Walton County allows you to have an 800-square-foot accessory structure. Just like everyone in Seclusion Code can have a 800-square-foot accessory structure. Do you have any other questions?
Yes, I do. The drawing that I have in my book shows 5 lots, and that shows 4. 1, 2, 3.
Right now, we're asking for the developer's agreement to limit it to 4 single-family lots.
And is that the configuration of the lots?
Yes.
So what's in the book is off the table?
I'm not even sure that I've ever seen anything that showed 5 lots.
I'm looking at it wrong. That's 5 individual.
Yes.
Yeah, that's not even what we submitted at the planning commission. So I'm not quite sure where this came from. I
thought it was
apologize.
Exhibit A.
That is not what we are looking at doing. That is the correct thing.
That exhibit is of the original Seclusion Cove subdivision, and it shows the easement. That's what that's in there for.
So that's not part of our
This,
development proposal.
this is, the one that you have in your packet is that.
Okay.
That was for reference about the easement to show that there was an easement there.
Okay.
I asked that they provide one for you.
Thank you. Any other questions for Ms. Seward? Any questions from the audience? Anyone want to say something from the audience? Yes, sir, come on up. State your name, spell your last name, please.
It's Mike Weger, W-E-G-E-R. I'm on the board of directors for Seclusion Bay Homeowners Association. And we had some concerns before tonight, but I've talked to the attorney representing the developer, and I think she's answered most of them. One of our concerns is if you approve this tonight, if he could sell lots tomorrow, and then we're dealing with 4 different owners trying to work these negotiations out. I think we've still got room. We're still trying to work with them and get this hammered out. Our concern is we've got a gated community with a roadway that they've got an easement through, so we've got no control over what they're going to build or how they're going to build it. And I'm assured that they won't be able to do it without a development order, and that maybe that's, so we've still got some time to negotiate and work it out through a development order if they're not going to build consistent with our neighborhood.
Commissioners, to that end, this is a small-scale amendment. You are simply changing the land use and restricting it to no more than 4 lots through the development process.
And I think
through this process tonight, there won't be 4 lots to sell tomorrow.
And I think you've got a letter from Bob Swift. He's one of the owners on Lot 19 with his concerns.
All right, thank you.
All right.
Any other comments?
Motion to approve?
Have a motion? Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And just to be clear, the motion and accept includes the developer's agreement as well. And one of the things I'm sorry, I got distracted, but one of the things to make sure we're clear about, if developer's agreement fails for any reason, the ordinance would fail as well. So just so everybody's clear about that.
All right,
Yes,
Commissioners, the next item is Treasure Trove Estates. This is a request to approve by final order. The project is being reviewed by Bob Baronti. This is that's not a bad thing. This is a major development order application submitted by Emerald Coast Associates for Phase 2 and 3 of a master plan neighborhood on 24.05 plus or minus acres with a future land use of residential preservation and infill. The project is located from Goldsby Road in 98, Goldsby Road to Los Robos Grande Drive, identified by the parcel numbers in your packet. This was continued from 2/14/17 BCC meeting. This item went to the Planning Commission on December the 8th and was approved with the recommendation that Galley Lane is made a cul-de-sac and that Public Works and the applicant will look at the stormwater on the north side of the property. The motion was approved, and I believe since that discussion and at your last board meeting, the option of utilizing a T turnaround at the end of the development was discussed, and I believe that's what they're here to present tonight. Bob?
Good evening. My name is Bob Baronti, B-A-R-O-N-T-I. You've pretty much wrapped it up. There was just a couple things I'd like to add. There was also a stormwater analysis request by the board, and it was done, and it the study reflects that there will be no change in the stormwater between pre-build and post-build. And also because of the consideration of causing Galley Road not to go all the way through, the applicant developer will have to come back after, if you consider this for approval, would have to come back and vacate the abandonment because it won't follow through with what was historically agreed upon, making the condition that Galley Road would go all the way through, and it would only go to your board. So we would be able to bring that in before the plat is being done. And if there's no other questions, I'll turn it over.
Bob, I got one. I think we had some discussion at the earlier meeting concerning some type of landscape buffer. And I think we were wanting to try and get it moved. If you start up there at Casa Grande and come south, it was to go east along behind block D1 and 2. Is that still on the table?
Well, I'll let the developer speak for that, but not really, because that was going to buffer the road that continues, but there will now be a residential lot to the north that at the top of the T, so it will be just a traditional residential on residential buffer.
Well, what about the area south of that lot 41 that makes the angle there going back to the east behind number 42, 43, and 44?
I'm not sure on that. I'll let the applicant address that, sir.
Thank you.
Yeah, Commissioner Nipper, do you have a question for Bob?
I do, on conditions of approval. It doesn't matter who answers it. Regarding the South Walton Fire Marshal recommends that lot 40 does not have a direct access to T turnaround. Between the conditions out.
So basically, you got the T.
Mm-hmm.
The lot that's on the top of the T would be allowed to have direct access because there wouldn't be excessive parking there. But the lot over to the west could stack on the T, so they're asking for, the fire marshal was asking for a connection further down on the lot, so that couldn't be used for boat storage or a continuation of a driveway.
And that will be addressed.
Yes. And that would be one of the conditions we would ask you, if you consider to approve this, that you would add that condition of approval.
And Commissioners, let me just briefly talk about the abandonment. The abandonment was actually conditioned upon a through road through the development. So what we'll have to do is, you can approve the development order as presented if you choose to do so, and then instruct us to go through the separate proceeding, because the condition for the abandonment would not have been met since there won't be a through road. We'll have to go through the separate proceeding for a county-sponsored vacation of that abandonment. Just so you're clear on what we have to do.
All right, Dean, you may come up now. Thank you. Thank you, Bob.
You're welcome.
Good evening, Madam Chair and members of the board. My name is Dean Burgess with Emerald Coast Associates. I've read the staff report and listened to Mr. Barani's introduction of the project and concur with the results of the staff report. We have heard, particularly Mr. Chapman's suggestion to come back with a T turnaround. That's exactly what we've done. The developers agreed to it. It appears that the neighbors are satisfied with the configuration to the best of my knowledge. And to answer one of your questions, because lot 41 will be a lot, we're required to maintain a landscape buffer around that lot. So the setbacks on that lot will be increased to 10 feet to accommodate a 10-foot buffer, which will be planted, as well as lots 32 through 44 similarly have a 10-foot landscape buffer on the north end of them. So there will be a buffer there as well between the lots that you mentioned, 1 and 2. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions the board may have regarding the project.
Do you have additional questions? Any questions from the audience?
Good evening, Melissa Ward of Saxon LaSword, W-A-R-D is my last name. I have been sworn in. And today, I want to say first that I am very grateful to this board, to Dean as the engineer, and to the developers for coming together and revising the plan for a T-turnaround. And I also am very pleased to say that we met with the county staff in concurrent with some of our conversation at the last meeting, and it came out to be very helpful to us to understand everybody's position, and thank you for that. With regard to the abandonment, and I know exactly where you're coming from, I would maybe suggest or recommend that the board do this concurrent with their plat so they don't have any delay time. I don't know if that works for them, but it worked. They've done it in the past for the county. And then I would also just like to say thank you for asking about the consideration of the landscape buffer and things that's to the neighbor, that's to the north of Lot 42 and to the east of Lot 41. Initially, that request was based on the fact that there was going to be a through road, so the T-turnaround does take off some of that burden as long as we can be aware that they're not going to have that impact. And we do appreciate that very much.
Thank you, Melissa.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions, comments?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you, Commissioners. The next item is the Ford abandonment. This is a request to approve by resolution. The project is being reviewed by Vivian Schammel. This is a petition for abandonment application submitted by Core Engineering and Consulting requesting the abandonment of 16.5 feet of public roadway on the east side of Lot 8 in the Sundance subdivision with a future land use of neighborhood infill. The project is located from US Highway 98 West, turning right on Ellis Road, left on Payne Street, and right onto Sundance Court, and is identified by the parcel numbers in your packet. This was continued from the February 28th BCC meeting. This item went before the Planning Commission on February 9th, and the motion was carried with the following vote. It was approved, no conditions. So. Vivian is here?
Yes, thank you. I don't really have anything to add to that. It's a fairly simple request. I think if you look on your second to last sheet of your staff report, there's a specific purpose survey, and that kind of shows what the situation is that they have and why they're requesting the abandonment. And also you do have 2 letters of opposition that was passed out.
This doesn't apparently go anywhere. This
Easement.
It really doesn't. I will let the applicant explain to you. It's kind of odd that it was actually platted that way,
It
but
doesn't look like it goes anywhere. It's just, I can see us not abandoning something that connects to something else, or we can convey from one place to the other, but it's not, it's just.
do you have any questions, or let the applicant speak?
What's on lot 6 and 7?
I have to look at the aerial to see if there are houses there or not. No, they're vacant at this time. Oh. And Mr. Carpenter has just asked me to request that you request the staff report be entered into the record.
Madam Chair, I would recommend you accept it.
I do, thank you. Any other questions for Vivian?
I do, Mac. It says Walton County Public Works Engineering Department does not support the abandonment of right-of-ways that would serve future needs for beach access, roadways, utilities, stormwater conveyance for the residents of Walton County. Are you concerned about this at all, with this parcel?
That is the standard Public Works comment.
Okay. There's nothing specific about this one?
As these goes, this may be one of the least available for those purposes, but that is certainly a consideration for the board in their determination.
But I don't see how we can use it if it doesn't go anywhere.
What about stormwater?
That was my before one, but kind of.
We can speak to that.
Okay, thank you, Vivian. Yes, come on up, sir. Come on.
Good evening, Board. My name is Ed Stanford with Core Engineering and Consulting, STANFORD, and I have been sworn in. Thanks for your consideration tonight. I think Ms. Commander is correct. It is an easement that really doesn't serve any purpose anymore. It used to be part of a 33-foot easement, but the adjacent property to the east has already been built out. If you look at this aerial right here, there's an RV park that actually is built over that easement. I'm not even sure it was abandoned, but that's been sitting for many, many years. We actually maintain the rest of the easement as it is adjacent to Sundance Court, which is a private road, but we still maintain that setback of 16.5 feet on our side or on the developer side. This project was approved and platted many, many years ago, and is just now being built out due to market circumstances over the last 8 years or so. It was platted, and I don't know if it was missed or why it was platted this way, but the developer did not catch this, the builder did not catch this until he actually went to pull the building permit on lot number 8 and found out there was an easement that was still being enforced. So realistically, it is just for lot 8. We only need really 6.5 feet. We requested 16.5 because it would unencumber the entire lot, but it's at the board's pleasure whether we go the whole way. We would like to get the 16.5 feet. As shown right here, all the way up the lot. This is the 6.5 feet that encumbers the lot, though. Okay, we're still relegated and required to maintain a 10-foot landscape buffer off the property line anyways. So if y'all have any other questions. And in regards to the stormwater, this is a private drive that already maintains and operates a stormwater system for this drive, for this roadway, and all the houses that are being built.
Any other questions for the applicant? Any questions, comments from the audience?
I did. So are you just asking for the hatched part of lot 8 or the hatched and the shaded? Because if the shaded, then it's not contiguous, unless I'm seeing something wrong.
We're asking for the east 16.5 feet of this lot.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so it's basically, there's two lines, there you go right there. That's really what we're asking for. What you were looking at before was a line that was the 10-foot landscape buffer. That's what was shaded. The additional line that was on the inside was actually the full 16.5 feet.
Do you need that 10-foot buffer?
What's that?
Just asking, do we need that 10-foot buffer for?
Yeah, the 10-foot buffer is required. It was required by the original land development order. Thank you.
Motion to approve?
Have a motion?
Second.
Motion and a second. Any other comments? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Nay. One nay. Two nays. 3-2.
Thank you, Commissioners. The next item is the Villages at Seagrove, also known as Watercolor PUD and DRI Amendment. This is an ordinance for your consideration as a resolution of the Board of County Commissioners of Walton County, Florida, amending the Villages at Seagrove, also known as Watercolor Plan Unit Development and Development of Regional Impact, Resolution 2002-32. Providing for severability and an effective date. Renee Bradley reviewed this. Renee is on a cruise, and we wish her a wonderful time on her cruise. The St. Joe Company and Watercolor Neighborhood Association are requesting a determination that their application for amendment to the previously approved Watercolor PUD and DRI constitutes a non-substantial deviation under subsection 380.06 paren 19E 2K Florida statute. This site, which is subject of the amendment, is located in Walton County, sections 14 and 15, Township 3 South, Range 19 West, lying south of US 98, consisting of 498.5 plus or minus acres. This item went before the Planning Commission and was approved on February the 9th, 2017. And Mac was filling in for Renee on this project.
Do we have any questions for Mr. Carpenter?
I do. The 64 units, if I'm doing my math right, my second DRI is a little bit over 6%. And one of the considerations is a change in the number of dwelling units by 5% or more. Is it decrease, not a change? Or is it a change, an increase, or a decrease?
A decrease would not be considered a change in this case.
Perfect.
Any other questions? Mr. Shipman? Want to come up and add anything?
The only thing I want to point out, Commissioners, my name's Gary Shipman, Dunlap and Shipman. I'm General Counsel of the Watercolor Homeowners Association. I have been sworn in. This is actually part of a much bigger agreement of a negotiation of a variety of things between the Homeowners Association and the Developer St. Joe Company, and part of the agreement on things that we negotiated with them. They agreed to reduce, to voluntarily seek reduction of the density or the amount of units that could be in watercolor. And so the Homeowners Association is very much in support of this. We had our members vote. It was, you can't ever get everybody to vote for everything, but it was overwhelmingly a majority of the Homeowners Association is in support of this and actually having fewer units ultimately built in watercolor. And so we would ask you to approve this.
Perhaps, Madam Chair, just for clarity, Mr. Shipman, those other components of that agreement do not impact the DRI or the PUD that would require any action of this board. Those are internal.
No, those are a variety of other things, such as our beach club and how we're going to operate it and things like that.
Just wanted that clear for the record.
Okay. Do we have any comments, questions from the audience? Okay.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion and a second to approve. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed, like sign.
Thank you, Commissioners. The next item is number 7 in your packet, Holly Bay Estates. This is a request to approve by final order. The project has been reviewed by Bob Baranti. This is a major development order application submitted by Interlight Engineering requesting approval to construct 17 single-family homes on 4.3 acres with a future land use of neighborhood infill. This project is located 0.7 miles west of the US 331 and Chat Holly Road intersection at the southwest corner of the intersection of Chat Holly Road and J.D. Miller Road, and identified by the parcel number in your packet. This was went to the Planning Commission on February the 9th. Motion was made by Mr. Perry, seconded by Mr. Roberts, to approve the Holly Bay Estates with the condition that a 6-foot privacy fence be required along the lots that back up to Chat Holly Road. The motion passed with that condition. Bob.
Thank you, sir. You did a great job covering it. Just that we also put in the conditions section the fees that will need to be paid before the platting further down the road. And like to say, there is one letter in your packet about this area, but it's not directly impacted by this proposed site.
And just one other word for you, Commissioners. You notice this is a 17-acre single-family subdivision. Typically, the threshold for a major development subdivision is 20 lots. This is, again, I might have said 17-acre, but it's 17 lots. But because it is in neighborhood infill, the board has instructed staff previously that any infill projects will be treated as major developments. So that's why this one doesn't meet the 20-lot threshold, but it is before you as a major development.
Go
ahead.
I was just going to ask you to enter it into the record, the staff report.
Yes, ma'am, I'll recommend.
I know. Thank you. I will. Thank you. And this might be for the applicant, but tell me more about the creek. Is it stopping up a creek, or this this
It's,
development?
I'm sorry, ma'am.
Go ahead.
It's not anything that's actually on the site plan. The farthest I can figure it out, and a lot of us have tried, is the sites here, the address written on the side is kind of northwest of the site. And there's no, not that creek, whatever she's referring to in that letter, is not being impacted by any way of the site. It's further to the west before you could even figure that it comes into any play. But her letter wasn't really clear, and my many conversations were even less clear, so I don't really have an explanation other than what we pieced together, that it's not really going to be impacted by this development. It is in the region, but it's not going to.
Okay, Mr. Carpenter, did you want to add something?
Yes, I did. Since I was referred to earlier in the meeting, having a conversation with Ms. Bowman, I did not refer to it as a trench. I referred to it as a mosquito control ditch, which is what it is.
Okay, I did put the two together. Thank you.
She was the lady that offered this?
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much. Applicant, do you have anything you want to add?
My name is Mark Murray. I have been sworn in. I'm with Interlight. I just want to point out that we did propose the 6-foot privacy fence that was asked for by the Planning Commission. And if y'all have any other questions, just let me know.
Okay. Any other questions for Mr. Mark? Okay, any comments from the audience? Yes, sir. Come on up. It's nice to see you again.
Thank
Well, it
you,
is.
Commissioners. First, howdy. I haven't seen all of you since the election. Wanted to say hey and congratulations to all of you. And to you that are still sitting, congratulations too. I'm here as a notified owner, but yes, sir. David Kramer, K-R-A-M-E-R, and I have been sworn. Thank you, Bill. I'm a notified owner within 300 feet of this project, and I was the public participant that brought to the attention of the Planning Commission about the fence. And the reason, I don't know if all of you read the email that I sent about it, that it gives me, and I'm here basically as an attaboy. I wanted to thank Interlight, and I wanted to thank the developer for taking serious concern of a public concern and making it happen without any to-do other than it made good sense. And the reason I wanted to bring it to your attention, other than just leave and say thank you to them, is because while you're still in the considerations of your LDC and comp plan renovations, that this is the type of project that the staff doesn't have muscle or guidance on any development that backs up, where backyards come onto our thoroughfares, or whether they're connectors or arterials or whatever. So it might be an opportunity to, rather than have the public come up and waste your time and staff's time and the developers, whoever, the applicants, to say that, you know, there's nothing that guides us on when we have a backyard facing a county thoroughfare. It might be a good time in your planning part right now to include something that would take it out of guys like me wasting your time. So thank you for listening, and thank the developers, and I hope this project is a big success for all of us.
Thank you very much. Thanks for sharing.
Nice to see
that.
you.
Always good to see you.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Any other comments from the audience? Okay, seeing none?
Motion to approve.
Motion?
With conditions.
With conditions, yeah.
Motion.
Second.
Second with conditions. Okay, motion second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, like sign.
Ms. Jones, before we move on, I was remiss earlier. I want to make a comment about Renee Bradley.
Okay.
You did say she was on a cruise, and dang well deserved for that woman. She has been working on the Sandestin issue since before I became a commissioner. And I've been in this job 10 years now. And she did such an outstanding job, and I want to thank her publicly, and thank the rest of the staff, because it just wasn't a one-person effort, but she has dealt with it for such a very long time, that I wanted to publicly thank her and the planning staff for all their hard work.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing that.
Thank you, Commissioners. The next item is Lakeview subdivision, item 8 in your agenda. This is a request to approve by final order. The project is being reviewed by Bob Durante. This is a major development order application submitted by Interlight Engineering, requesting approval to construct 57 residential units and a pool amenity with 2 office buildings on 19.72 acres with a future land use of small neighborhood and conservation residential. The project is located on Highway 331 and 98 intersection, turning on right onto Thompson Road. There are a number of parcel numbers that are all identified in your packet for this project. This project went before the Planning Commission on February the 9th, and it was approved by the Planning Commission with no conditions.
Madam Chair, I'd just like to make one correction. The parcel has been completely changed to small neighborhood, but GIS didn't get the final word from the state, so they were hesitant to change the actual map. But the board, it went all the way through the process and it was approved. So now it's all small neighborhood, and then where the change was shown in the 2-to-1 was where the 2 commercial office places will go. There's 2 conditional approvals. The initial in your packet, you'll see that there was a higher proportionate fair share amount. It was requested to be re-reviewed from the applicant to Dewberry. Dewberry came back with a new fee of, it's also in your packet in the very back, of $83,010. That would be one of the recommended conditions, and also at the time of recording the $750 Walton 911 fee. So I just wanted to make that clarification. It's all Zone 1 now, and they will put the commercial uses to the front facing the road. They will be the smallest impact that they could figure. So it's going to be sort of like a real estate offices, and then the rest of the development was as described.
Any other questions for Mr. Bob Durante?
And if there's no questions, I'd like to have this entered into the record, please.
Yes, ma'am. I'm sorry, let me recommend that you accept the.
I'd be remiss if I didn't mention just a couple phone calls. I'm sorry.
That's okay. That's all right. Go ahead now.
I would just like to mention, nothing you can do about it, I would just like to mention, I've gotten a couple of emails, phone calls, and letters. A plan for traffic light and turn lanes at Sugar Drive and Highway 98. I know we've got to address, as we make these developments and more developments on that road, this one's 39 parcels. We just need to start.
57 single family, and then the 2 commercial. Yes, ma'am.
Right. Just as a board, we need to start looking at 98 and
Sugar.
more lights, turn lanes, and things like that. I just want to make sure that goes on the record. Did I read, or did I? Is there a pond back there that that's the commercial? We're selling bait, or did I just make that up?
That was a very, that was a very, very early proposal.
Okay.
It's transitioned into what you're showing, the developer will describe. There will be a pond with a connected public walking trail. They're proposing, if approved, to build a bridge across to get to the park for access, and then it was recommended it stop there at the bridge because of the use of the park right in that general area. And then they'll also have a path that'll come up to a gate that'll close approximately the same time that the park closes, because this is a gated community, so then it would have security for the community. The pool facility will be for the use of the owners themselves, and then the bikeway will be a great extension, and hopefully we can continue it down to provide better pedestrian and bike access.
Just making sure it meets the neighborhood commercial uses.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
it met that standard with the two office
Okay.
placed in the south part of the entranceway.
Thank you.
Any other questions? That's all, thank you.
You're welcome.
Applicant, would you like to add anything?
Curtis Smith, Interlight Engineering. I think everything's been covered pretty well. I did want to clarify that the multi-use path on the south and the east is actually, we're proposing in a public easement. So it will be, it'll be accessible to the public. Now, we haven't actually discussed with TDC about maintenance of it long-term, but I'm sure we'll have that discussion later on before plating or at some point, so.
Any comments or questions from the audience? Anyone here to speak to this? Okay, seeing none.
Motion to approve with staff conditions.
Okay, we have a motion, do we have a second?
Second.
Motion second, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed, like sign.
Thank you, Commissioners. The next item is the Musset Bayou subdivision. It's a request to approve by final order. The project is being reviewed by Bob Durante. This is a major development order application submitted by Jenkins Engineering requesting approval to subdivide 7.75 plus or minus acres into 31 single-family residences with a future land use of neighborhood infill. The project is located from Highway 98 east to Musset Bayou Road north and identified by the parcel numbers in your packet. This item went to the Planning Commission on February 9th. It was approved with the floodplain manager recommendations and limit the height of the this says grade, but I think it means houses to 2 stories.
Yes.
And the motion was approved by the Planning Commission with those conditions.
Any questions for Mr. Ferranti?
I do. There's a choice of foundation. Was there a stem? What is that part of a condition?
Would you like me to read the list of conditions if you do choose to approve it?
That's one of the conditions that we have to choose?
This would be the whole, they have the choice by the LDC which way. They can either construct it on elevated foundations using piers or pillings, or they can build it on a stem well foundation. And then we put the exceptions for the accessory structures less than 200 square feet that wouldn't have to be built up, and that residents will not be over 2 stories from the top of the elevated foundations. So the foundations at the end of their rise will be no higher than 2 stories. Okay. And then a proportionate fair share of $37,750 for concurrency deficiency. A recreation fee will be required, and a 911 fee will be required. If you have any other questions, I'd like to answer it, or I'll turn it over.
I just have a want-to-know question. Why wouldn't the auxiliary buildings and anything like also be elevated?
Well, these requirements come out of the Land Development Code.
I understand, but I mean, why wouldn't that be a requirement? I mean, if
Well,
you're elevating the house, keep it from flooding, isn't the auxiliary building going to flood?
But I think I would think that the explanation is one is a living structure, well, the other one could just be a shed that no one is actually living in it.
If I could add to that, FEMA regulations require the accessory structures to be elevated because they're not habitable space.
So this would be a quote-unquote, say, mother-in-law cottage, or something. It would be just like a shed or something of that nature.
A garage.
Okay. Thank you, Bob.
You're welcome, ma'am.
Applicant, you may come up.
Good evening. My name is Rick Borst. Forest Consulting and Management. I have been sworn in. Good evening, Madam Chair, Commissioners. I'd like to take just a few moments to give you a brief history on this parcel. It's 7.75 acres. It was purchased back in 2006. And at that time, the land use was, as today, neighborhood infill, allowing up to 8 density units per acre. The owner's original intent in 2006 was to develop a high-density multifamily plan based on that 8 units per acre designation. As far as neighborhood infill, we have some examples of that directly in the vicinity of this project. We have Water Oaks subdivision, which is a 10-acre parcel. It has 69 units, which is a makeup of 45 single-family homes and 24 townhomes, with a density of almost 7 units per acre. About a half mile from the subject property is another development, which is Plantation at Santa Rosa. This community is also 10 acres in size, has 72 single-family homes. So between these two infill projects that have been approved and have been developed, we're averaging over 7 units per acre. Back in 2006, the original plan for this parcel was 60 units. We were looking at 20 townhomes and 40 single-family homes. Townhomes are very dense in this area, and the single-family homes ran along the parcel. In 2016, the owner and the development team reevaluated and determined that a low-density residential subdivision was the best use for the parcel, as well as for the surrounding community. We had a community meeting back in May of 2016, and we presented a conceptual plan that had 33 units. After meeting with the residents, we went back, took notes, and we reduced that density to 31 units, which we have today. The project today is at 31 units. It averages, it's actually 4 density units per acre, so 1/2 of what's allowed in neighborhood infill. And additionally, there are several amenities that we have in this development that you will not see along Mustard Bayou with any existing developments. We have purposely brought in wet retention ponds so that many of the lots have the ability to be directly on water. We also have a lot of green space where we have walking trails for our community. And also internal to the community, we have a community pool, as well as dog park and green space for the residents of the community. This project was approved by the TRC and meets all planning requirements. We are not requesting any variances. We have no preservation buyout on this parcel either. The project was also unanimously approved on February 9th by the Planning Commission. Thank you for the opportunity. Any questions before we bring Scott Jenkins?
Can you explain your stormwater retention?
Actually, what I would like to do from an engineering standpoint is to have Scott Jenkins do that, if I may.
I figured Scott would do it.
And do it much better than I. Thank you.
Thank you.
Scott Jenkins with Jenkins Engineering. I have been sworn in. I can speak off of this, but yes, sir, the stormwater management is actually a system of 2 wet ponds that are either here and here. We have curb and gutter along the roadways that pipe the water into here. We have a mosquito control ditch that runs through the middle of the property, and then we also access directly from Mustard Bayou here where there's a discharge for some of that water. But yes, basically wet detention, and the wet detention is there because we need to we have limits on how much we can fill the property, because one thing, portions of it are in a flood zone, so we have limits on that. And so instead of filling, we dig a hole basically and fill, and it becomes a lake, more or less.
Okay, where it dumps out into Musset Bayou, is there some place that it stays there and sort of cleans itself up before it dumps off into there, or is it?
There is not a direct discharge into Muscle Bayou other than what runs off the backs of the lots, and there's a 50-foot buffer along that area. The direct discharge is actually the mosquito control ditch that goes to the north.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Just to point out a couple other things. I'm sorry, anybody else have any questions on the stormwater management? But I'll just point out a couple of other things if not. As Rick said, the development is basically 31 lots here on just under 8 acres. The average lot width is about 66 feet on average, 60 in some areas. Some of the pie-shaped lots are a little smaller. The largest lots are along the waterfront here. The roadway is a standard Walton County requirement of 24 feet with curb and gutter, drainage inlets, and sidewalks on both sides. Be happy to answer any other questions you guys may have.
Any other questions? That's all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions, comments from the audience?
Good evening, Melissa Ward, Saxon LeSueur. Saxon LeSueur represents some of the homeowners adjacent to the property. And I believe that you should have in your packet a letter that was signed by Lois LeSueur discussing some of their concerns. I'd like to briefly, I have some packets, if it's okay, to hand out that are just picture exhibits and maybe a copy of a part of the land development code that you already have in your packets already.
Would you please provide the applicant a copy?
Do what? Oh, yeah, I'm sorry.
Hang on just a second.
Sure.
Do you want this packet introduced into evidence?
Yes, please.
Mr. Borst, do y'all have any objections to these documents going into evidence? Okay. Madam Chair, I'd recommend you approve them as objectors exhibit, composite exhibit 1.
Okay, I approve.
Thank you.
You need another one? I had two. Do I need one? You need one?
I believe this is in the staff report.
I think it is. Okay. So, if it's all right? Yes, okay. So you're going to hear from some of the homeowners in the adjacent properties. They're going to have their own personal concerns about what the subdivision may do to impact their property and their lifestyle. But I wanted to talk briefly about the compatibility analysis, and Lois is here to clear up any kind of concerns that you may have, but I'd like to just sort of give you some things that they're talking about. The first thing in the map part of the handout that I gave you is the future land use map. And it's already in the packet, so this is just a bigger version to give you kind of an idea. Specifically, it's important to note that the property, while it is neighborhood infill, is surrounded on the north, the south, and the west side by residential preservation. And then to the east is conservation residential 2-to-1, with the exception of one conservation property. That conservation property has no density, so that's just, it's going to be all trees owned by the state. Conservation residential is 2-to-1 maximum density, and it has a certain amount of preservation required, or I should say no clearing up to a certain point on those properties. Infill is a great piece of property to have as a developer and develop, and it's usually something that's going to help a transition between higher densities to lower densities and vice versa. Mr. Borst, in his testimony and at the Planning Commission, testified or stated that this is a low-density residential type development, which is fabulous. And we can appreciate that they went from 8 units to 4 units, but we want to talk about compatibility. Compatibility is, well, to be more clear, Mr. Dice in 2015 issued a memo that explains how the planning department is to review compatibility as it relates to our land development code and comprehensive plan. Specific interest is given to the properties abutting and adjacent, and those are defined in that memo as also being across the right-of-way. So what we're really looking at is what is closest to that piece of property. And for visual aid, if I may use your, may I? Sure. So here's the subject property. To the north is Musset Landing. Those properties are 3/4 of an acre. The properties to the south is River Bend. Some of the lots are 1/4 of an acre, but its density is approximately 2 to 1. Over to the west is Woodland Bayou Estates. Those are typically 2.5 to 3 acre lots. And this property here is undeveloped, that's conservation, and this is conservation residential 2 to 1. So these lots, none of them are 1/2 an acre or 1/4 an acre. These are, the maximum density is 2 to 1. The issue for compatibility is whether or not it fits in the neighborhood. Now, some of the property is undeveloped, so what you have to look at is what's the maximum density allowed. It's 2 to 1. This property is developing at 4 units to the acre. It's less than infill allows, but it's still twice the amount that's allowed in the adjacent properties or developed already in the adjacent properties. Some of the property is mentioned, and the compatibility analysis mentions that it's got green space. I'm not going to argue what green space is, but I will tell you that the subdivisions that are to the south of this, within that 1/4 mile radius, have conservation lands and or wetlands on either end of the subdivision, which is why they clustered their density on 1/4 acre lots in the center of that development at 2 units to the acre. The couple of subdivisions that Mr. Boris mentioned in his testimony, they're outside of the 1/4 mile radius. They're 1/2 a mile away. They are much more intense. We understand that, but they are not in the 1/4 mile radius. We would like you to take into consideration that the code mentions a 1/4 mile radius for a reason. We can stretch further down the road if we want to. We can look further down south and all along 98 and get higher densities because it gets more dense the closer you get to 98. This is property that's along the bayou and getting closer to the bay. So we just want to be, or getting further up north towards the bayou. So we want to make sure that we're understanding what that means. His compatibility analysis includes, on the very tip, Churchill Oaks. I use the Wonk County Property Appraiser site. It may not be accurate, and I can't guarantee that because I didn't get somebody to go out and survey it. It may or may not include it, but I'd like to add that the analysis, you analyze the whole subdivision. That whole subdivision is 42 acres, 95 lots. Maximum density, 2.3 units per acre. It's not 5 units to the acre. It's not 6 units to the acre. It's not 4 units to the acre, 2.3. The neighbors in this subdivision or surrounding this subdivision, they're going to tell you a lot about what they think the impact is going to be on them. But what you get to decide on is it compatible? It's not. 2 units to the acre is the maximum density around there. What I've provided to you in the back of your exhibits is a spreadsheet. The spreadsheet, it basically tells you what some of the surrounding properties are, and it goes along and there's 3 highlighted sort of pink lines. And I better put my glasses on so I read them correctly. The first pink line, line number 9, potential development comparison. That means what's the maximum allowed density per the land use in the area of the 1/4 mile radius, mostly focusing on the properties adjacent to or abutting that subject property. So the density per acre maximum allowed would be 2.296. Let's call it 2.3 units to the acre. Then the development comparison are those subdivisions that we are talking about that he mentions in his analysis. When you look at it, you're still looking at less, 1.1 units per acre for the comparisons of the developments within a 1/4 mile radius. Mass area analysis, that's where we take the information, and there's a map in the exhibit. This one. I excluded waterways so that we're not being unfair. This is just land mass. Using the land mass, it's 0.79 units to the acre. This is not a 4 units per acre area. In addition, just so you can have an understanding of what the neighbors are talking about, there's a blue page that has some pictures of houses. We understand that these houses were built before the flood zone requirements came into place, but that what they're concerned about, in particular with compatibility, are adjacent properties being built 2 stories above parking, which will then put them 3 stories looming over some of their homes. Now, they're going to speak to that. I'm not here to speak to that because we don't have any design plans for the subdivision to say it's compatible or not compatible. I'm talking about density.
Okay, any questions from Melissa?
Yeah, Melissa, how many of these subdivisions were platted, the final plat given to the county, based on the septic tank rules that we have to, that's always been, well, I won't say always, but it's 2 to 1 was the max because of the septic system. The final plat when they were finally recorded, how many of these subdivisions?
You're talking about Musset Bayou, the ones directly south of there? Some of those were platted in 2004, and and I don't think they have septic tanks out there because they're quarter-acre lots. The ones that are directly south of there, Musset Bayou, they clustered all their density in the center. They have conservation on the end and conservation on the end. This is Musset Bayou. It's not septic tank.
And it never was. It was never platted.
No, you can't put a septic tank on
You're
a quarter
right.
acre.
You're right.
The Musset Bayou Manor, these are not septic tanks. Conservation on the end, conservation on the end.
Yeah. Okay.
Any additional questions?
Lois LaSura will get up to answer any questions that you may have regarding some of the other comments in the letter. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Ms. LaSura?
Good evening. I think Melissa has pretty much covered our concerns. This entire area is 2 units to the acre or less. And whether or not that was based on septic tanks, quite frankly, that's what's there. And that's what they need to be compatible with. Maybe a little bit more than 2 units to the acre might still be compatible, but they're doubling the density that is surrounding them. And some of the adjacent lots are even larger. You can see these lots are much larger than even half-acre lots. Some of them, there's one that's like a 10-acre chunk that only has 3 homes on it. So yes, the immediately adjacent areas are much, much, much less dense than what's being proposed. And that's the criteria for compatibility. Do you have any other questions?
No. Thank you. Anyone else in the audience? Yes, come on up. Sure is quiet here.
It's the last of the Mohicans here. Hi, my name is Michelle Bailey, B-A-I-L-E-Y, and I've been sworn. And good evening. My husband and I own Lot 7 on River Circle, and we purchased this in February of 2016. I was aware that's parcel to the north that's on my boundary, and I best guessed that it would be developed sooner rather than later. And that was okay. I understood that. I knew River Bend was 15 home sites on 8 acres. I knew Musset Bayou Manor was developed with 17 homes on 9.74 acres, and Musset Estates had 24 on 10 acres. I looked at all the surrounding homes, the lot size, and the price point, and the larger acreage tracts to the north. We made the decision to purchase because I felt that any new neighborhood that was approved would be compatible and developed in line with what was surrounding my land, what I could see. Musset Bayou subdivision, as it is being proposed to you, is unfortunately not compatible. Compatibility is defined as a state in which 2 things are able to exist or occur together without problems or conflict. Although it may be zoned for this density, there is definite conflict. Lois and Melissa have done an excellent job outlining the issues for you within the code and land use, but there are other problems. There's no build-out time associated with this. That means construction noise, and traffic indefinitely. Why not require a 24-month build-out time from the time of purchase from the developer to resolve that? There's still confusion on the number 2 of the conditional approval from the planning that states the residences will not be over 2 stories from the top of the elevated foundation. Does that mean that parking can go underneath? 2 additional stories of living, which makes this a 3-story structure. It's my understanding it does mean that because the building code doesn't consider parking a story, but from a practical standpoint, it's still a 3-story structure. If you put parking underneath, you've got the 2 stories above, 3 stories in height, it's just 3 stories. We would like an additional setback, which Ms. LaSure brought up to the Planning Commission if it's approved with that. I'm a realtor. Selling property is not just my job. I'm very passionate about it, actually. It's not financially feasible to sell this proposed development at the proposed value with the multiple neighborhoods that are a more competitive price. We were told at the community meeting that the price point for the lots would be $500,000 and higher, with the developer saying that the water lots would be significantly more, and that they intend to make them the highest price points in the surrounding area. My question is, how can anyone be competitive when you're offering less for more, and why would they believe a consumer would pay that? You can purchase over an acre of bayou-front property across the way at Woodland Bayou for $299,000. It's 1.25. You can also buy at Musset Bayou Manor or Estates. They have new homes with an average lot of 0.23, under $450,000. The newest neighborhood, Hunter's Run, is going to be 15 half-acre tracts with higher-end finishes, and it's only starting at $400,000. Let's consider Churchill for a moment in the analysis because it was brought up. But let's make sure we consider it in total, because you have to include the fact that they chose to develop only 2.4 homes per acre. That's less than half of what's allowed by the county guidelines. They have a 46% open space with setback variances to preserve the trees. Their amenities boast an 8,000 square foot clubhouse, a marina with boat slips, a mile of waterfront. Every house has a bay view. There are 2 stocked lakes, parks and preservation areas to offer privacy between the sites, and a 2,400 square foot open air pavilion. Even with all those amazing amenities, their sales are only 14 of those 95 lots. The fact remains that they are not able to get market acceptance because of their lot size. They're just not selling. The developers have tried to put this many homes on Musset Bayou before and failed. Sea Pine sits across the street from our neighborhood with 32 platted lots on 10 acres, very similar to what's being proposed now. Their sales are dismal. There's 5 homes built, and all the lots are overgrown. I've been selling real estate in South Walton for several years. I can tell you without a shadow of a doubt, no customer has ever come to me and asked where they can pay more money for less property with fewer amenities than something that's right down the road. It just doesn't happen. As a realtor, I am a huge advocate of property rights and development. We bought this property believing not only would any neighborhood beside us have to check the box of applicable zoning, but also be compatible with the surrounding homes. While I understand that the proposal is less than what is allowed, and I applaud the owner for that consideration, it's not enough, because even that is more than twice of what surrounds it. I implore you to protect me and my neighbors. Please send this back to be designed in such a way to be compatible with the existing homes, with a reasonable build-out time, fewer home sites, and no chance that a structure inclusive of parking can be more than 2 stories. If you approve this without specifically stating that the structure in total must be no more than 2 stories, they will be allowed to put parking underneath, because several home sites due to the floodplain have to be on pilings. I thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you, Ms. Bailey. Anyone else? Yes, sir, come on up.
One of the questions on this coming up tomorrow. Can we put you've got to build it out by a certain amount of time, and then what happens when they don't? I mean, what are we going to do, take the,
I think the market dictates.
Yeah, the market dictates that.
Yeah, I don't, Mac, you can correct me, I don't think we can put a limitation on a build-out period. Yeah, I'm pretty sure we have no authority.
Come up again. Real quick, you're finished, but come up.
The only reason I brought that up was because I went to Churchill Oaks website to look at what they do, and since that was brought in, they have that.
Yeah, you can do it privately. The developer can do it.
I just wanted to throw it out there. It was being proposed
You have to build on it in a certain amount of time, but we don't have that.
Thank you. All right, come on up, sir.
Yes, my name is Charles Bush, B-U-S-H, and I was sworn in. Obviously, I'm really here to represent the homeowners, even though I'm being represented by Saxon LeSueur of Musset Bayou, or Musset Landing and River Bend. But I'm here more specifically to drill down a little bit into the people, the property owners that's really going to be affected the most by this development. I mean, it's easy to go quarter-mile radius, pull these numbers in and out, decide what's compatible or not. But if you notice, I placed names on all these things because I think that's really important, because a lot of these maps just have numbers, as far as the range and stuff. But these homeowners that we're part of, and this is my lot here, are all, in total, they're like, the size lots are .83, which is not even close to being compatible for what the proposal is. If you put 31 houses, if it's approved, put 31 houses on this subdivision, you're automatically tripling the density right there, and that is not compatible. But if you want to also use the same standards that the county is asking for, you're actually over 3 times. So in reality, what you can do with, if you take like the average size of one of our lots, you can actually take 5 of their lots and place on one of our lots. In addition to having our lot so close to this, we have the added advantage of getting a side road coming straight at us also. The developer's analysis likes to bring up the issue that our larger lots exist only because of that sewer and water utilities did not exist at the time that they were developed. We think those larger lots are an asset, and they continue to be bought and sold regardless of what the utilities are now. There are no sewer systems on these lots now. So it's not a matter of what happened before, it's a matter of that these are attractive lots because they are larger. Several of you have, in other discussions, have brought up stormwater issues, and it is true that these retention ponds are going to be directing most of their emergency spill into the mosquito control ditch. But what happens after that? That's our concern, is that this mosquito control ditch runs right through our property. That particular part of it is a low part, and this is actually headed north. This mosquito control ditch continues to go through here and to go to Hodge Road. It also pulls into a whole culvert system. My issue, or our issue, is not the fact that it's not properly designed to get the water off of that property and into that mosquito control ditch. We really don't know what's going to happen after that. You know, in a 100-year storm or a heavy rain event. We really don't know, and I'm sure that's something that just cannot be built into your calculations. I don't know if Hodge Road, that culvert system under Hodge Road, can handle it. If you notice on this map that Musset Bayou Road is the road going down. The road just to the north of that is Hodge Road. The water is coming off, it's actually flowing north toward the bay. It comes down both sides of Musset Bayou Road, and where Churchill Road, or where Hodge Road, East Road turns to the right, there's water coming there. So it's all this water, including this mosquito control ditch, is coming together at Hodge Road. I'm not saying it can handle it, I'm just saying that we don't know in the type of rainstorms that we've had. My request would be if we could lower the density on this project and take some of the pressure off of these retention ponds, because it's hard to see on these maps. The front part, especially, of this development is loaded with old growth trees. So it's our feeling that if you start tearing this stuff down, they're natural water retention systems themselves. So it's sort of our desire that the density be lowered, and has been requested to 2 units of the acre, that you would help take some of that pressure off of these retention ponds. And Ms. Nipper, you have brought up the traffic issue. We are aware of the proportional share fund that has, that this development would be paying into. At 31 units, you're talking about putting 60 cars back on Musset Bayou, which ends up being at Highway 98. The county's analysis has already said, or the state analysis, I don't know who's doing the traffic studies, has already said that this is an inadequate intersection. You brought up another project that is going to have the same issues. Another thing that's not brought up is that there's actually, it's on the almost the very bottom of this. It's actually, look at it this way. There's a new development right here that was actually not even though it was in the quarter-mile radius for analysis, it was not actually in the analysis because it was probably didn't show up as a plat. It's called Hunter's Run. They're actually trying to get this development up and running again. I think it's been platted for a long time. But the issue is that they're going to have 15 lots, and they're going to be half-acre lots is what they're planning on doing. So you're talking about putting another 30 vehicles on Musset Bayou Road eventually, plus what's going to be coming out of Churchill Oaks. So we're hoping that by lowering the density that you can help with the problem and not add to the problem. So with that, I would just like, as the others requested, that we lower this density to be truly compatible with what's in this neighborhood to 2 units to the acre. Any questions?
Any questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a question. I'm sorry, I'm missing something. Is Musset Bayou Court included in the compatibility analysis done by Lois or Melissa? I'm having trouble figuring that out. Which number is it? Which line is it?
I think I see one over a chart.
Which line is it on here, Melissa? I'm sorry, I'm having trouble figuring it out. Yeah, it's here. Musset Bayou Court is what it says here.
Oh, that's the road. The name of it is
What's the name of that subdivision, I guess is what I'm asking. I'm sorry.
Musset Bayou Estates.
Okay. Okay, thanks. I just want to make sure.
Good. Did I see someone else that would like to speak? Anyone else? Okay, seeing none. Would you like to have some time to refute or discuss or talk? Or?
And I have a question while you're coming up. Could you address the height issue?
Yes, ma'am. The county's requirement regarding the height issue is that for the areas that are in the floodplain, you have to build on piling. So it is the county's requirement that we have to do that. And so the question was asked during the technical review, what consists of a story? And so when we went to the building department, we went to Mr. Bearden and asked for a definition. And his definition was that it consists of everything above where the piles stop. It's not the area underneath the house. So to answer the question, yeah, I think technically you could park underneath those houses, have 2 stories above it, and it still be considered a 2-story house by the county's definition. I don't know that the developer intends to do that, and he can address that, but that by definition that would be allowed. So. And that was one of the things that I think I was supposed to address that Mr. Boris was asking me to. The other is going to be just the stormwater questions that came up. And because I do have some experience in that area, we actually did Churchill Oaks, which everybody's talked a little bit about, which is this development here. Whenever we did Churchill Oaks, as part of that requirement, they paved East Hodge Road. It was a dirt road back in the day. And whenever that dirt road was paved, they actually replaced and repaired some culverts that went underneath East Hodge, which I think the gentleman was talking about, the discharge to the bay. And I can tell you, I am familiar with that intersection, and those pipes were sized accordingly for the storm events that the county required at the time. They entered into a right-of-way agreement in order to do those improvements. And as he stated, we do discharge in the mosquito control ditch, which goes north, but that is after retaining the event within the wet ponds, and it discharges after major events. I don't know that there are any other engineering questions, but I'll be happy to answer anything else that you guys have.
Any other questions? Commissioner?
Maybe for staff. Mac, I don't know if you can answer this or not, but we got residential preservation on the north and south side. Is there any reason why neighborhood infill's in the middle?
Probably because those residential preservation parcels had houses on them at the time the comprehensive plan was adopted in 1996, and this subject parcel was vacant.
All right, thank you.
Commissioners, if I may, let me please respond back to Ms. LeSueur's and Ms. Ward's comments, as well as the public's on compatibility. First, I'd like to actually address Ms. Bailey's comments. She made some specific comments about lot size and values. It's very interesting. One new analysis that we do as we look at how we develop new communities tells us what's currently being sold and home types and lot sizes. If you look back 1 year, the highest value sale along the Musset Bayou area, we have actually two interesting examples. The first is Churchill Oaks. And let me preface by saying we are not comparing ourselves to Churchill Oaks. It's an amazing community. But we found over the past year, we had 2 home sales. There were others, but these 2 are the highest. We have a home that sold on lot 12 for $1.5 million, and a home that sold on lot 26 for $1.5 million. What's interesting with this is that both of these lots, one is 0.14 acre in size, the other is 0.17 acre in size. This is a classic example of where lot size had no negative effect whatsoever on the value or price of that home. But more realistically, let's just move down the street along Musset Bayou Road, where we have the Musset Bayou Manor development. It was one that was brought up earlier. This is the D.R. Horton development. And of all the home sales along Musset Bayou, the top 3 or 4 all were placed directly here in this development. This is lot number 3, sold in March of 2016 for just under $500,000 at $497,000. We have 3 others in the same development that have all sold at $450,000 or above. Now, there were no other sales along Musset Bayou, including the residential preservation neighborhoods that have been mentioned previously, sold anywhere near that value. So we do find that if the homes are proper in size and the homes are in demand of what the communities are looking for, then you can have on smaller lots. In this case, these are under 1/4 acre. They're about 0.22 of an acre. We find that home sales can be very effective.
I'm
and
sorry.
by the way, they've almost sold out in this in about a year.
Mr. Morris, these were not lot sales, these were home sales?
These were home sales, not lot sales. These were home sales. Correct. Picture off. Regarding compatibility, they had referenced Mr. Dias when he was here. Back in April of 2015, he actually sent out a department directive, DD 2015-01, and it was specifically to address compatibility studies for neighborhood infill. Everyone's discussion today talked about density. This is not a density analysis, it's a compatibility analysis. And there's far more than just density to be looked at when doing compatibility. There are 7 specific criteria that Mr. Dias listed in that directive. Number 1 was dwelling unit or housing type. Number 2 is building orientation. Number 3 are building setbacks. Number 4 is building heights. Number 5 are lot dimensions. Number 6, lot area or density. And number 7, commercial intensity, which of course in this case does not apply. So there's 6 remaining criteria that we look at. One item that is important to note, and it was brought up earlier, is that in fact, Musset Landing, which is not platted, but is called Musset Landing, directly to the north, and River Bend, directly to the south, are residential preservation. In the case of River Bend, it was platted in 1990. So again, the requirements in that development, not having utilities, of course for larger lots, which was already talked about earlier. But the other thing that's important to note is that it does not have any of the planning requirements that are now into the 2017 standard. And specifically, there is no stormwater retention in those developments. There's no wetlands preservation or setbacks. There's no scrub habitat preservation or sidewalks or many of the other things that we are now to the current standard that we have to hold. So as residential preservation, these are for older communities that did not have the services at that time. The other item that was brought up in the compatibility study was the partial subdivisions that are being referenced. In that quarter-mile diameter, which we look at, we are to look at all the lots that are affected. And the lots were correctly calculated in the compatibility study. You are not required to bring in the other surrounding neighborhoods that are there. We are strictly required to look at the individual lots themselves as that's brought into the data set, which was done correctly. As far as the infill side, as far as its zoning, yes, the developer, or the owner, I should say, has voluntarily reduced that density. In the compatibility study, we talked about that a bit. We did not make any reference that the parcel's been rezoned. We recognize that it is infill. The statement that was made in the compatibility study is that at 4 units per acre, it would meet the density requirements that is currently a land use in Walton County, which is low density residential. But something else that's very important. They made a specific point to discuss clustering of homes. When you look at our master plan, we have purposely designed the wet ponds for 2 specific reasons. One, of course, is the fact that we have lots that will be able to abut those, so certainly there's greater value for lots and homes that reside on water. But the other reason that was done is that it gives a considerable buffer to our neighbors to the north and our neighbors to the south. If you look at this plan, the primary density has been clustered in this area. If you look from Musset Bayou Road, this parcel is about 1,000 feet in depth. On the north, our primary clustering begins at 375 feet. So basically more than 1/3 of that distance. On the south side, as we have all of this green space, our major clustering here begins at 575 feet. So more than halfway through the depth of this parcel is where our higher density of the units begin. Ms. Ward had talked about a couple of the parcels where clustering was done. This is right down the street. It's part of the compatibility analysis. This is Musset Bayou Estates. And what they fail to recognize, because again, they talked about restricted density. On this particular project, the lot sizes are 0.23 acre, very similar to some that we have in our development. But what was not identified was the red that sits below the backside of these 16 lots. That is actually their stormwater retention. They don't have ponds on site. So these lots, in effect, are not 1/4 acre. These lots, in effect, are only 0.16 of an acre where you have allowable buildable surface. So while we decluster, we have to look at the fact that these lot sizes, in effect, as far as buildable space, is 0.16 acres. The other development that they referenced, Musset Bayou Manor, it has even a more significant condition. In this case, the developer did 2 things. He encompassed all of these surrounding parcels in preservation, and then on these to the north in red, they also added stormwater. So while the average lot is approximately 0.23 acre, once those are removed, they're only 0.13 acre in size. Again, smaller than what we are proposing in our development. And that's important to understand because while they talk again about clustering, we have to look at the fact that what is currently in and along Musset Bayou are parcels that are the same size and similar in size to what we have. The other thing that needs to be just mentioned briefly is that for our standard lot, the first floor buildable footprint is about 2,475 square feet. That means that we can build a single-family home at over 2,000 square feet. There's not a need to go 2 and 3 stories, which is mentioned. And quite frankly, at that square footage, we are at or above the current average square feet for the parcels that sit to the north and for those that sit to the south at River Bend. So we have to look at more than just density. Density is not compatibility. As a matter of fact, if we look at the remaining items of those 6, dwelling unit and housing type, as with the neighboring communities, this proposed project can have 1 and 2 story, just as there are 1 and 2 story homes throughout the neighborhood, north and south, and all along Musset Bayou. We can also have architecture, though they're not designed, but the architecture with 1 and 2 story homes can be similar to what they have currently, which are Florida Cracker or Craftsman or traditional brick homes. So in that sense, from the dwelling unit or housing type, we meet compatibility. The second item is building orientation. As with our neighboring communities, I apologize for the delay. That's not my flip. As with all the neighboring developments, we have a main road that enters towards the center. Our primary homes sit north and south, and those that are on water, primarily up towards Musset Bayou, will face to the west. That is the same condition of all the other developments that are along Musset Bayou. In that sense, we meet compatibility on that particular item as well. The third item is building setbacks. As I mentioned earlier in my introduction, we meet the Walton County standard setback. 20 foot for the front, 7.5 for the side, and 15 foot for the rear. As I showed you previously with 2 or 3 other developments, they have similar setbacks in those as well. So if you look at the entire surrounding communities, there are communities that have similar setbacks to the Walton County standard as we have, which in turn means that we meet that compatibility standard as well. As far as building heights, we're proposing, or what can be developed, are 1 and 2 story homes, which we find all along Musset Bayou. That in turn makes it compatible as well. Lot dimensions. We just spoke briefly about 2 or 3 developments which I showed you where the lot sizes are at or smaller than what we are proposing. Our smallest is 0.12 acre and our largest is just about 1/3 of 1 acre. So we have varying sizes throughout our development. As several of the developments along Musset Bayou, not all, but several, have lot sizes very similar to our as well, which is item number 5. Because of that, these surrounding areas, we would actually meet that compatibility standard as well. And last is the lot area, which I just spoke about previously. We find that our first floor buildable area can be 2,475 square feet. The Musset Landing to the north of us that abuts this section through here, the home is there. The smallest is 1,816 square feet. The average home size is 2,515. Again, well within the range of what we'll be able to construct. The homes to the south, along the bend, the smallest home there is only 1,556 square feet. The average is 2,200. Again, we are able to develop our homes of similar size. So when you look at the 6 key criteria of compatibility, not density, but compatibility, we do in effect overwhelmingly meet the compatibility requirements as set forth by Mr. Dias in that department directive. So again, just to summarize there, I just wanted to demonstrate that the project is compatible according to those criteria. Again, we're not requesting any variances. We meet all the Walton County guidelines. And we really want to again emphasize, as the owner had asked me to do, that a lot of time and effort and care was taken to propose a development that we feel will be very attractive to families, whether they're young families or to the baby boomers, as well as presenting a project that we feel will significantly enhance South Walton. So I thank you for your time to consider this project, and we certainly and respectfully ask that you approve that this evening. Any questions?
Any questions? Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm concerned about the compatibility of the parking underneath the house. That, when I went through the neighborhood, that is not compatible.
I would agree in that sense, but we find, actually, I would prefer to have Scott to speak when it comes to the actual elevations. But when we look at the elevations or the topography of the parcel, we're talking 2 or 3 feet. If we look at where our road dimensions are, we look at where the lowest lots lie, we're talking about a 2 or 3 foot, stem wall that is required. We're not talking, for instance, similar to Grayton Beach, where we have to build 8 or 9 feet up, above that flood zone. That's not the case here. We're only talking 2 or 3 feet.
I know that's all you have to build, but you said that you might build ones with parking underneath. That to me is not compatible in that neighborhood. I drove it today.
I would agree in that sense. But again, as we follow the directive and also the response from the building department, that was their definition of that. Okay, ma'am?
Any other
Thank you for your time.
questions? Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I have a question for staff. In your analysis, does this meet the code and the comp plan? Because, Melissa said that because of the compatibility, it didn't meet the code and the comp plan.
Yes, sir. If you look in the LDC, where it addresses the NPA area, which neighborhood infill is part of in the land development code, it clearly says 4 units with water and sewer. These products will be offered with water and sewer available.
Okay.
Any other questions from anyone?
Melissa, would you like to speak? I know you're back there talking, so okay, you can't. They said you can. I'm sorry.
That's fine.
No.
Okay.
We've had rebuttal.
All right, we've had rebuttal.
Do what?
We're ready to do something.
I make a motion, we accept it
With the staff conditions.
with the staff's conditions.
I'll second for discussion.
Okay, discussion.
Discussion. Yeah.
Well, I mean, my thing is it meets the code and the comp plan. They've actually cut down the density that they could have had. So I just, I think that it meets it.
Being able to park underneath, like as if you're actually on the bay, is not compatible on this entire road. It's not.
But they're required to build on pilings. They're required to build on pilings.
If they lower the density, is there a possibility of not having to do that? If the density is lowered, do you have to have a 2-story house with parking underneath where it's on pilings?
Matt, can you answer that question?
I feel like neighborhood infill, sorry.
Commissioners, Matt Carpenter for the Planning Department. The special flood hazard area requires elevated foundations. It does not require parking underneath.
Right.
And it would be, in my opinion, within the purview of this board to limit that.
And that could be part of our motion?
It could be.
Just keep in mind that piling goes in the ground,
Yeah.
and you can cut it off
Houses all
wherever
day
you
long,
want to.
1 or 2 feet, but
Yeah.
I've seen houses that have parking underneath, and that is not, to me, is not compatible with this entire road.
When we say piers or pilings, that doesn't necessarily mean on poles.
Exactly.
I
As we
understand, but
typically
parking
think of.
underneath was mentioned, so I've got to be careful of what I allow. That's my vote. I mean, that's my reason.
Yes,
for being
ma'am.
here.
But the piers or pilings is a requirement of the flood zone. They don't have to be elevated high enough to be able to park on here.
Exactly.
Okay.
So, I mean,
May I make a comment, please? We already had, through the planning commission.
Wait a minute, he can't,
Wait a minute. Mark.
No, we're in discussion
No, we're-
today. We don't
we're
take any more
not.
testimony.
I'll amend my motion that they not allow parking underneath the house.
I'll amend my second.
So we have a motion that follows the conditions, but does not allow parking underneath the house. We have a second. Okay, are we ready to vote? Are we all?
well, let
Go
me
ahead.
ask if you may want to amend that to a distance above grade. Because if you say you can't park under the house, they can still build it 10 feet high,
That's
but,
not, yeah.
I
so
don't
it's,
understand my grade, so tell me how high it
Well,
needs to be.
you've got a natural ground elevation
Okay.
now. the piles will go to whatever. And I would say no more than 12 inches above the crown of the road.
I thought we had already had something in place concerning the minimum is an elevation above the road.
I'm sorry, we're in
We-
discussion now.
I'm sorry.
Let Mac answer my question, or the question. How high does it have to be above grade?
1 foot above the base flood elevation. This is an AE7.
And that's a minimum height.
Yes, sir.
So you can certainly establish a maximum height of no more than a foot above that. But-
2 feet? Is it
or-
with the condition of 2 feet of a?
I'll amend the motion to that.
I'll amend my second.
So just to be clear, the motion is to approve it with the condition that no more than 2 feet above the base flood elevation for the finished floor elevation.
With the other conditions.
Yeah, exactly. Okay.
There's a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, like sign. Do you want to just take over? You want to just take over like that?
Take it over.
Or
Well, how many more we like?
just 3.
3?
Okay.
We'll go to the next one.
We're going to take a 5-minute break. I'll hurry.
Okay.
Getting back to order, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The next item is Emerald Coast Business Center West. This is a request approved by final order. The project is being reviewed by Bob Barante. This is a major development order application submitted by Jenkins Engineering, requesting approval to develop a 27,000 square foot business complex on 2.75 acres for the future land use of Coastal Center. The project is located on Business Center Drive off US 98, and the parcel number is in your packet. This item went before the Planning Commission on February the 9th and was approved with no conditions.
Commissioners, Matt Carpenter for the Planning Department. Bob is going to present this project, but I'm going to offer one additional condition on this project that is not contained in the staff report and the draft final order. And that's going to be a modification to item 1C of the final order, where it talks about the proportionate fair share payment. This particular project impacts a segment of US 98 that has been approved to be widened to 6 lanes. That improvement has not yet been inserted in the proportionate fair share concurrency management system. It will be ideally within the next 60 days or so, and we'd like to offer an additional condition that we reconsider the concurrency certificate prior to it being due for payment as a result of adding these improvements that FDOT has approved and contracted for. That will affect the whether or not this is a deficient segment.
Specifically, where's it located? I know it's south of 98, but which end of 98 approximately?
Miramar.
Okay.
Yeah, it's Business Center Drive. It's just east of South Holiday Road, next main north-south.
And that is part of the new 6-lane expansion up to Miramar or Marlou or whatever.
Yes, sir. It comes all the way to Tangamar Drive.
And there is a provision in your comp plan that says that once they are funded and within construction within, is it 3 years, Mac?
I believe so.
That says then those new numbers will apply. In this instance, we're not in receipt of those new numbers to make the calculation, and quite frankly, we were not willing to budge on the existing numbers until we're comfortable what those new numbers are and how they would apply. Simply, we're not going to monkey around with prop share, except in the, as we're allowed to, and we'll give you the assurance that if it is recalculated, it will be recalculated on the numbers that are presented from DOT as this project moves forward. It fits in the time frame of what is required to happen. We just don't have those numbers yet, and so we're asking you to approve it with the existing traffic concurrency numbers and the fee that generates, which I believe is
$251,000 and change.
But that once the new numbers are here, we will recalculate based on those numbers, understanding that it does fit the criteria that the improvements would apply to.
Is there a possibility that that figure could go up, or could it come down?
It will go down.
It will. I
It will
figure
only
we
go
have
down.
another 2 lanes out
Yes,
there.
sir.
It's bound to change that. Okay.
And on behalf of the developer, he's not in control of that part of it right now, so we just like to request the opportunity to reconsider the concurrency management certificate once we get that installed into the CMS.
Okay, if he starts moving forward with the development, he would have to pay the $251 as of right now.
Only once he pulls the building permit for the building.
All right. You that close?
But this will allow them to get started with the horizontal improvements for this particular site, with the understanding that we're going to recalculate the proportionate fair share.
Okay.
And I'll turn it over to Bob to further explain the project.
Well, I think between the two of you have done a great job. If you have any questions, I ask. I know you're probably tired of hearing me talk.
Do you want to address that?
Yes, I will. The applicant was, but I'll address it. I got contacted a couple weeks ago, I guess, by a property owner on the other side of Business Center Drive, who, if you see in your packet, his loading zone, he doesn't have enough room on his property to turn his semis when he loans. So currently, he goes into the right-of-way across the applicant's property and turns. And he wanted a condition that, because he was there first, they would have to line up the access points. When I explained to him, I said, but if you don't have an agreement, it could be considered trespassing. He said, well, then my trucks will just roll over the buffer. Then I explained to him, well, if you do that, that's a code violation. So I inserted the letter. He said he was flying in today. I don't know if he's here or not. But I don't see how anything in the land development code, because the turning radius is tight for him, that the applicant would have to change his entrance and allow access onto his. He actually wanted to be able to pull into his property and then make the rest of the turn and go out. But I was going to leave that to the applicant to explain. But did I answer your question, ma'am?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bob.
You're welcome.
Scott, you want to come up?
Scott Jenkins with Jenkins Engineering. I have been sworn in. I think y'all have a general idea of what's happening here. I think Mac did a good job of explaining the traffic situation. But just a brief overview, we have 3 buildings. There's 27,000 square foot of commercial space total. This is the west side of an existing kind of industrial park here. This road was put in the early 2000s. And these developments over here are mostly light industrial and kind of warehouse spaces. The property in question that you're talking about is right over here. And the reason, there's a couple of reasons why we don't really want to relocate the driveway. One is so that the owners of these properties don't have the same issue that this gentleman's having. And we really need this in this configuration for traffic circulation to work for these guys. And the other reason is just because it's not his property. And
I like that second reason better.
Yeah, that's the other reason. There's just to touch on the traffic really quickly, the $251,000 is based on some some cost estimates for improvements on 98 in that segment that are in your CMS. That cost estimate is basically, it takes an estimated value to add lanes and it comes out to $9.5 million in that little segment, which is a lot of money, obviously. But they take that and then divide it by the number of trips that it would add by adding the lanes and come up with a cost of per trip basis.
You don't really understand that formula.
No, yeah, I don't actually, but it costs about $10,000 a trip, basically, which is a bunch. But now that that segment of 98 is being improved currently, and it is going to be done within the next 3 years, it is, according to y'all's comp plan and procedures, it's supposed to be that capacity is supposed to be added to that segment. So that cost should go down significantly if it doesn't bring that segment into concurrency with those improvements. I'll be happy to answer anything you guys have on the site. It's pretty straightforward, though, I think.
Any other questions? Any questions in the audience? Okay, seeing none? Motion second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Thank you very much. Thank you, Scott.
Quick on the gun there. Just want to make sure the conditions
Yeah.
were also part of that.
Conditions. Always.
Good luck with that $251,000.
Commissioners, the next item is Seacroft subdivision plat. This is a request to approve a final Mylar. The project is being reviewed by Rita, and we're going to stop there. This is a plat, it's way too late to try to work that one out. This is a plat development order application submitted by Rare Earth Inc., requesting approval to plat 5 residential lots on 2.5 acres with a future land use of low-density residential. The project is located south of Highway 98, approximately 650 feet east of County Road 393 on the south side of Seacroft Drive in Santa Rosa Beach, and the parcel ID number is in your packet. This item went to the Technical Review Committee on December 7th and was approved. That's Matt.
Yes, and you may not recognize me as Rita, but since she can't speak today, she's losing her voice. She asked me to stand in for her. And I know I won't do nearly as good of a job, but one thing to point out on this particular project is all of the fees have already been paid except for the actual recording fee that has to be paid to the clerk. We've already collected sidewalk, recreation fee, the 911 fee. There's no preservation buyout, and we've collected the proportionate fair share also of $8,500.
Any other comments, questions? Any questions? No applicant here?
Second.
Motion second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed, like sign. Moving on. Number 12.
This is CR 83 Business Storage LLC. This is a request to approve by final order. Project is being reviewed by Rita and presented by Mac. This is a major development order application submitted by Jenkins Engineering requesting approval to develop 80,640 square feet of commercial buildings on plus or minus 9.7 acres with a future land use of light industrial. This project is located at 316 South County Highway 83 and is identified by the parcel number in your packet. This item went to the Planning Commission on February 9th. The motion was made and was passed for your approval, to recommend approval to you.
I'd be happy to answer any more questions. Mr. Jones did a wonderful job introducing this project. The applicant is here also to answer any questions you might have for them.
Any questions for Mr. Carpenter? Any questions for Mr. Jenkins? Mr. Jenkins, would you like to say anything? No. Okay, no questions, then.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed, like sign. Do we need a motion to adjourn?
No, we don't. Is it my eyes or is that fuzzy?
That's fuzzy.
Yeah, it's your eyes. It's been a long day.